Good morning. Good morning. Oh, we can do better than that. Good morning. Good morning. All right, so let's start the meeting this morning with the Louisiana Tuition Trust Authority meeting first. And members, remember we're being streamed live, so you'll need to turn on your microphones when you're recognized using that bottom gray button. You can tell when your mic is on because the green light is turned on. Speak clearly, closely, directly into the microphone. And right before we get into our formalities, I just want to recognize the 80th birthday of a Louisiana champion in education. Supervisor Tarver turned 80 years old about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. Wherever he is, he was here. He was right here.
And he's so fast, he moves.
And he just walked out.
He moves fast.
I was about to say, I have to do it again. So that would be really good, right? And he'll be like, "What's going on?" Right? So he said when he walks in, we'll stand and applaud, and he'll be like, "What's going on?" Right? So yes, we had a great board development meeting this morning, and I want to turn the reins over to Commissioner Reed to call the meeting to order.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call the Louisiana Tuition Trust Authority meeting to order. Rhonda, good morning to you. Will you call the roll?
Morning. Dr. Reed,
Here.
Regent David, Regent Ewing, Senator Fields, Regent Finley, Regent Jackson,
Here.
Ms. Kincaid, Regent Levy, Regent May, Regent McDonald, Representative Mincy, Regent Meir, Regent Perez, Regent Pryor, Regent Sill, Regent Solomon, Regent Sterling, Regent Temple,
Here.
Regent Wow, and Mr. Williams, and Regent Williams-Brown. You have 14, which does represent a quorum.
Thank you so much. The next item on the agenda is public comment. Do we have anyone who signed up for public comment?
No public comments at this time.
No public comments. Thank you so much. Hearing none, we'll move on. Members, you've received a copy of the minutes from our September 22nd, 2021 meeting. Hopefully you had an opportunity to review those and there are no questions. Is there a motion to approve the minutes? There is a motion by Regent McFinley and second by Regent Ewing. Any discussion or questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. One jokester here. You're for it? Okay, all right. All in support. Motion passes. Okay, just checking. We have one consent agenda item before you this morning. Dr. Butte, please proceed.
Certainly. Members, you have one consent agenda item, which is to add the interest rates for the Principal Protection Plan and the Earnings Enhancements Funds for the 2021 calendar year. 2021 is correct, so you do it for the prior year. These interest rates are determined by the treasurer, so therefore you would be just accepting those. It is required that we do codify these in rule, which is why this item is coming to you. The LATTA Advisory Board has reviewed this and recommends approval of this consent agenda item.
You've heard the recommendation of the LATTA Advisory Board to approve the consent agenda item. Are there any questions? Is there a motion to approve?
Motion.
Motion by Chair Temple, second by Regent David. Any discussion or questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposition say nay. Motion passes. Any other business to come before this committee?
No, ma'am.
Is there a motion to adjourn? Moved by Regent May, second by Regent Seal. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes, and we are adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Thank you all. We'll now get started with the Board of Regents committee meetings. First up is the audit. Oh, 1 second. You can wait. Yeah. That's 7 minutes. Y'all good? Yes, sir. Oh, everybody, there's Supervisor. Happy birthday to you. Happy I told Supervisor Tarver when I grow up I want to be just like him, so I'm very excited about that.
Mr. Chairman, I call the Audit Committee to order and ask Commissioner Reed to call the roll.
Chair Seal,
Here.
Sonia Perez, Regent Ewing, Regent Solomon,
Here.
Regent Weil, Regent Williams Brown. You have a quorum.
Thank you, Commissioner. We move to item number 3, the internal audit presentation. Today we have Elizabeth Bourgeois, the Regents Assistant Commissioner for Audit and Compliance, as well as Kristen Burke and Laura Swallow from Postal Wade in Netterville joining us for the presentation. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Regent Seal. I'll get started with our part of the presentation. We will cover just an update of our contract year 4 for this fiscal year, our internal audit plan, and then we will go into one of our recent audits that we just completed. We'll give a results overview of that one. Starting with the status update for this fiscal year internal audit plan, we have completed now 3 of the 4 items that we had on our plan, which is the audit of the Board of Regents endowments, which was completed and presented on in December. And then we did the IT security audit follow-up for Board of Regents. We completed that in February. And then we've recently completed our audit of Lumcon accounting processes. We actually issued our final report just last week. And that's what we will go over in more detail today. And then we also have begun our audit of LASFA's Louisiana Go Grant. We had our kickoff meeting with the LASFA management just yesterday, and so that is now underway. So moving into our overview of our audit of the Lumcon accounting processes, our team performed an assessment of the accounting processes and controls of the Lumcon division. We specifically were focusing on the budget development, monitoring, reporting, expense classification, approvals, and reserve fund activity for our process assessment. To complete our procedures, we performed the following. We obtained any documented policies and procedures related to Lumcon accounting processes. We also obtained and assessed any internal analysis that was performed both by Regents and Lumcon of the accounting activity for Lumcon for the last 3 fiscal years. We also conducted interviews and assessment walkthroughs with key personnel to just gain an understanding of any of the processes of the accounting activity along with any internal controls in place. So through our procedures, we have identified 3 observations. 2 of these were determined to be of moderate risk to the organization, and 1 of low risk. We've included here our risk ratings and the definitions of each risk category for your review. One note about this slide, we had put together our slide deck prior to us issuing our final report, so it says preliminary results there, but these are now final. Okay, in the essence of time, we're just going to go over our moderate risk observations in our presentation today, but our final report, which was issued to the Audit Committee and management last week, includes all of them. The two moderate risk observations are listed up here. The first being related to the annual budget process. It was explained to us that each program or division, including Lumcon, will create their own budget, but it's all collectively submitted under the Board of Regents as a whole, included in their full budget annually. However, each monitoring of each program or division's budget is not currently happening centralized by Board of Regents. And additionally, we also realize that there's not really a process or guidelines for these programs or the divisions to follow as it relates to being able to report back to Regents any important budget activity to them on any basis at this time. The next observation was related to Lumcon's internal accounting policies and procedures. At the time that we performed our procedures, they were either not complete or they didn't exist. It should be noted, though, that the newly hired management over at Lumcon at the time of our procedures, they were in the process of putting together these documented policies and procedures, but they just weren't complete at the time of our testing. So we were able to issue our report, and we held an exit conference with management, and they have agreed to our observations and recommendations. And as part of their action plans, they provided to us a couple of items. They said, Board of Regents program finance staff will now review monthly reconciliation statements from the programs. They will also, the finance leaders of each program will meet at least quarterly to review each program's revenue expenditure activity and their budgets. And then also, Board of Regents will initiate an agency-wide review of finance-related policies and procedures, and updates will be made to these as needed to ensure alignment with the agency-wide policies.
Let me ask you to take a moment, and this can be responded to by any of you, but would you just give the board a recap of what is the significance of the classification scheme that is used, and why this particular risk you've identified as a moderate risk as opposed to a level higher or a level lower? Just a summary for the sake of bringing everybody up to speed.
Which observation were you referring to?
The moderate risk assessment on the Lumcon accounting observations.
Okay.
Why is that moderate as opposed to a higher or a lower level, just in general?
So for our purposes in performing this, when we went through, there's monitoring, I guess for the first one anyway, there's monitoring happening of the budgets, but it's not really formalized, and it's not all happening centralized. So since it's something that's kind of happening but it's just not formal, we felt that it didn't need to be a high-risk observation, and it was more of a moderate for that reason. The same thing with the documented policies and procedures. They're in progress. The processes are happening, and there's no control weaknesses that we can identify through what we saw, but they're not documented and formalized. So there's just that risk associated with, if someone's not there to do it, are they going to know what to do when something's not documented or formalized? And that's what makes it moderate versus low.
Based on your meetings with Lumcon management, would you expect that they would be able to correct these findings?
Yes, we do.
Okay. let me just see if, go ahead, Laura.
I would just add to that, particular to the first observation, the budget and the monitoring process, the action items that were provided, we do believe will address the risk, but we would recommend to continue to monitor the effectiveness of that, and if any tweaks need to be made as the process is implemented with respect to frequency or anything else, certainly continue to evaluate that, but at this point in time, we believe that they're adequate to address the risks that were identified.
Let me ask you if there are questions from the committee or the board on this particular point before we continue.
Regent Seal, I have a question.
Please.
I understand that the task was to look specifically into Lumcon's methods and the risks associated. Do we have reason, either from Postal Wait and Netterville or from staff, to believe that there might be similar risks in other programs, and can these observations be applied to other programs that might have similar weakness?
While we didn't necessarily look at the other programs, I think it's something that certainly needs to be evaluated related to those programs to determine if similar monitoring and oversight would minimize risk.
I would also note too that the action plans provided to us by management also include all programs. They didn't specify just Lumcon, so it sounds like some of that monitoring will be happening for all programs.
Thank you.
That's correct, Regent Solomon. So what you see here is a transition of a new finance officer and a failure to really surge in to say, here's documented process and procedure, and here's the oversight and support that is needed. And so Postal Wait and Netterville is absolutely correct. We want to make sure that we address the weaknesses and the moderate risk, but that the learning and the opportunity to really formalize and ensure that we have robust processes is in place for all. And so Matthew and I have discussed that expectation as well. And we expect to meet that expectation and also monitor the process.
Any other questions or comments on this point? Hearing none, would you continue?
That's it for my part. I think Elizabeth will take over now.
Thank you, Regent Seal. We have one item to come under other business. We wanted to give an update of where we are with the quality assessment review. We are working to finalize the contract with the independent accounting firm Horn to conduct a full quality assessment review. A quality assessment review is an independent internal assessment of the entity's internal audit activity, which seeks to ensure conformance with the IAA standards. We anticipate the final report will be completed by the end of the fiscal year, and the results will be provided to the Audit Committee. This update does not require an action, but I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions? No questions.
Are we evaluating what, I was listening, but I wasn't understanding. Maybe you were talking faster than I could listen.
Oh, sorry. Sorry about that.
What, in your opening comments, you said it involved evaluating, is that right? You mind restating that, please?
Yes, sir. So we are bound by the law that came out in 2016 to have an internal audit activity. That's specific to the Board of Regents. And that internal audit activity is required to follow the Institute of Internal Auditors standards, the International Professional Practices Framework. Sorry, it's a lot to, that acronym's a long acronym. And in that, we are required to have a quality assessment and improvement process. This quality and assessment improvement process has many facets to it, but one facet is this quality assessment review. And what it is, if you think about it from the most basic terms, is it is an audit of your audit function to ensure compliance with those IIA, the Institute of Internal Auditors standards.
Okay, self-examination of what we're doing, right?
Well, this is a full, we're contracting for a full quality assessment review, and Horn will provide us with the results on whether we comply. I think the words are conform or generally conform or not conform with the
Okay, so that's a
standards.
third-party assessment, right? Okay,
Yes, sir.
thank you.
It has to be a qualified third-party independent assessor.
Fine, thank you, Elizabeth.
Yes, sir.
When would you expect that to be completed?
Yes, sir. We expect that to be completed by the end of the fiscal year. So we should have the report to you by June 30th.
Okay.
And we expect to present that in August, should there be any findings.
Is there anything else to come before the Audit Committee? Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
It's been moved that we adjourn. Is there a second? Second has been made. Without objection, we are adjourned.
Thank you, Regent Seal. Next, we have the Legislative Committee. Regent Perez is unavailable to be here, so Vice Chair Sterling, can you please call the committee to order, ma'am?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to call the Legislative Committee to order. Ms. Kauser is going to be joined at the table by Regents Deputy Commissioner of Finance Administration, Mr. Labriere, as well as Chris Herring, who is the Associate Commissioner for Facilities and Emergency Management. Ms. Kauser, will you call the roll?
There we go. Better? Okay. Chair Perez? Vice Chair Sterling?
Here?
Regent David? Regent Levy? Regent May? Regent McDonald? Regent Jackson?
Here.
LCTC System Representative? LSU System Representative? Southern System Representative? And UL System Representative. You have a quorum, ma'am.
Thank you. We will now move to item number 3, the legislative update. Ms. Kauser, I think you have some good news as where we continue to make progress through the session, so thank you for that.
Absolutely. Oh, yeah, there, I can hear myself now. It dawned on me this morning driving in that we are getting near to the halfway point of the legislative session. And the good news is that we are ahead of the game. All 5 of Regents' priority bills have already made it through halfway of the legislative process. And that means that bills that originated in the Senate have made it out of Senate committee and off the Senate floor, and the same thing in the House for House bills. So real quick, to refresh everyone's memory, our top priority bill this session is universal transferability. And you may have heard this morning during development reference to that. Professor Denley, sorry. Deputy Denley made reference to it. But this one is going to create some transfer pathways so that we can make sure that all courses are recognized and validated and able to transfer, whether you're coming from a dual enrollment course, a 2-year to a 4-year, or any which way otherwise. We also have Representative Brass is helping us with a dual enrollment counseling bill. This one simply makes sure that when high school freshmen, incoming freshmen, are counseled by their advisors, that the advisors make sure to share with them all early education opportunities to include dual enrollment, AP, IB, et cetera. We have a Lumcon procurement bill, and this one simply makes it so that the procurement process for Lumcon is equal to that of other campuses and other programs in higher ed across the state. Power-based violence review panel. We've had such an active group contributing to this review panel that originally it was designed to have one member from each system rotate onto it, and they have asked, and we have come forward with a bill that will make it so that all 4 can serve concurrently. The final one is TOPS executive order codification, and this simply makes it into law the exceptions that were made via executive order. after Hurricane Ida. So just, those are our priority bills. Like I said, great progress on those so far. Our next item is to discuss a few of the other bills that are of importance to higher ed. Just wanted to share with everyone. Buddy Mincy, Representative Mincy, is carrying House Bill 546. This one is removing an entrance exam from teacher preparation courses. Currently, that is the only college where you have to take an exam to be able to get into the college. If you think about it, you don't have to do that to get into the College of Business, to get into the Science and Technology. So we are asking that that be removed because it is a barrier to admission and enrollment. However, there is still the Praxis Exit exam, the Praxis 2 exam. So have no fear, we're not diluting any of the qualifications and rigor. We are just helping make it a level playing field for students who are going into education. Ken Brass is carrying a reverse transfer bill. And the best way that I've been able to explain this to others is that if you set out to perhaps achieve a bachelor's degree and don't quite finish that up, you can come back and look and see if the progress that you've made thus far has allowed you to earn an associate's degree. So therefore, you can earn that associate's degree without, and have a credential of value to move forward with. Very excited about these next one. There are several bills that were filed that deal with allowing retired teachers and nursing faculty to return to the classroom. There are now, of that large handful, there are 3 bills that have gotten some traction. SB 434, as you see, is being carried by Education Chair Fields. And then there are 2, that one has made it out of committee and off the Senate floor. And then there are 2 others by Representatives Edmonston and McFarland that have made it out of House committee and are expected to be on the floor later this week. Senate Bill 131, Campus Internet Access. Beth Mizell is the author of that one. We were able to work with her, and that bill is going to focus on having all of the systems create policies that will oversee the use of internet and platforms on devices that are owned by the state on our campuses. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. Just kind of wanted to give you a little slice of what we're working on.
Thank you. All of those bills are really exciting, and we're excited about the process. Members, are there any questions for Ms. Kauser?
I have a question, Madam Chairman. In the bills that are designed to encourage retired teachers to come back, is it specific about whether they are math or science or English teachers, or is it a general effort to get just people who have been teachers in whatever curriculum?
So I believe Chair Fields' bill does specify that it is going to, he would like to focus on teachers that are in STEM focus. The others, I don't believe, and Dr. Reed, you can feel free to chime in. I don't believe that at this point that there is a focus. Now, we are also making sure all of these bills, when they started out, were only focused on K through 12 teachers. And so we are working with the authors to make sure that they also include post-secondary for nursing faculty.
Is there emphasis placed on those teachers that would need to be there to help with the dual enrollment program that we have?
I don't think that that's touched on at this point.
I don't, Regent Ewing, I don't think there's been a dual enrollment conversation. There certainly has been robust conversation around math, science, special education, those critical shortage areas. Obviously, if we have additional great STEM educators, it helps us with the dual enrollment as well. But I don't remember any committee testimony specific to dual enrollment.
Members, are there any other questions? We will now move to item 4. We'll have an update on the appropriations bills moving through this session. Deputy Commissioner LaBriere, will you present this item, please?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Regent Sterling. This slide is an overview of where the governor's executive budget started. This is the $75 million increase in state general fund, which includes salary increases, mandated cost, formula and specialized institution increases, Go Grant increases, and Title IX increases, as well as the statutory dedicated fund increases for broadband training and Reboot 2.0, as well as Murphy J. Foster Scholars, and the $5 million for innovation needs in the Higher Ed Initiatives Fund. You've seen this in February. You voted on allocating these funds in March, and I can report now on the next slide, Aaron. These increases remain in House Bill 1. House Bill 1 has moved through House Appropriations Committee and passed the floor and is now awaiting discussion in the Senate. So the $111 million increase by the governor remains. There were a couple of changes in House Appropriations Committee. This included a $25 million increase for the Workforce Rapid Response Fund. This is within LCTCS for the 2-year institutions, and the increase in funds is for healthcare programs to meet the nursing shortage across the state. There was a $4.2 million increase for the Healthcare Employment Reinvestment Opportunity Fund, the HERO Fund, which is at Regents, and this goes with our Nursing and Allied Health capitation program for the Health Works Commission. And there were 2 decreases at LSU for the Fireman Training Fund and the Fire Insurance Fund. This is for the Fireman Training Institute at LSU. It is being, the management of it is being moved to the state fire marshal. So it's just a procedural change there. So that's the overview on House Bill 1. There's 2 other appropriations bills that we are watching. Next slide, Aaron. The funds bill, House Bill 406, is a transfer of state resources into different funds. For us, there is $6 million in the Higher Ed Initiatives Fund. This includes the state match for the Good Jobs Challenge grant that we have applied for as the governor's commitment, and $1 million for programs for intellectual disabilities on college campuses. This is a governor-supported bill that's in the Senate right now, being carried by Senator Boudreaux. And then finally, House Bill 592, which is a supplemental bill for, these are funds that would be allocated to be used for the rest of the fiscal year we're currently in. So there's $4.5 million in state general fund allocated to different institutions for various needs. There's $1 million for Southern for their new nursing school building and planning and design. $1 million at Louisiana Tech to complete the Research Technology Institute building, and then you'll see on the screen the other allocations of funds. This also includes an increase in self-generated revenue for the Southern University Law Center at $6.2 million. And that concludes my overview of the appropriations bills. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Members, are there any questions for Matthew? Thank you, Matthew. Seeing now none, we'll take our next item is our capital outlay update. Chris Herring.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Good morning, members. Similar to the previous bills discussed, House Bill 2, or the capital outlay bill, has passed off the House side as of last week and also sits on the Senate side waiting to be heard the first time. The current posture of the bill contains 80 projects across all 4 systems in higher ed, totaling $287 million for fiscal year 23. The funding for future years is a little over $913 million to complete those projects. The highlights of the bill include 27 new facilities, and that's across all 4 systems and Lumcon's new facility down in Houma. That funding is for projects either ongoing, in construction, or under design, and they needed construction money, and some are for to get the initial design going on the new facilities. There's also 26 renovation projects in the bill and 18 that are deferred maintenance or infrastructure in nature. In addition to those projects, the Appropriations Committee added $50 million to the Board of Regents for deferred maintenance. That is double the figure we received last year, and we are trying to get a little bit more. We requested 77 million in deferred maintenance. So that's a positive in that regard. Lastly, like I mentioned, some of the other projects include Lumcon's Pelican replacement. They're replacing their research vessel, and to complete ULL's acquisition of the Lady of Lourdes property, which sits in between their academic and athletic portions of campus. The next slide just kind of shows a breakdown of funding by system and funding levels. As a reminder, priorities 1 and 2 will be converted to cash during the upcoming fiscal year. Priority 5 represents the trailing money for future years to complete the projects. And then there's also cash money, revenue bond funding, as well as fees and self-generated dollars. As you can see there also, as the bill moved through the various House committees, 20 projects were added, totaling $209 million in total funding, not just year one, but across the project lifetime in those committees. So that's included in that total number of 80 projects. I'd be happy to answer any questions on a specific project or system, if there are any.
Just a general question, obviously I'm not on the, but what percentage of deferred maintenance would you say that we've tackled with this one-time money? Estimate, obviously.
A nominal percentage. I mean, in all honesty, we received $25 million last year. The number is between 1.6 and 1.7 billion. So it's probably not even keeping up with the rate of decline in a lot of instances. The renovation projects in the construction of new facilities and demolition of existing facilities also has a large effect on the reduction of outstanding deferred maintenance.
Thank you, Chris. Any other questions? I do want to just comment on the extraordinary work led by our wonderful commissioner. And many of you support her as members of the Board of Regents, but I think in the comments last evening, we talked about education first, and what we say is first is where we put our money. And so to the governor and the members of the legislature who continue to be sponsors to do that extraordinary work, and thank you to the team, and thank you, Commissioner. Is there any other business to come before the Legislative Committee? Hearing none, is there a motion to adjourn? Motion by Regent May, second. Second by Regent Levy. Any discussion, any questions? All in favor of adjourning? Aye. Motion passes. We are adjourned.
Thank you. Thank you, Regent Sterling. So, next up is Academic and Student Affairs Committee. And Regent David's absence, Regent Finley, will you please call the meeting to order, ma'am?
Thank you. I'd like to call the Academic and Student Affairs Committee to order. Dr. Denley, will you call the roll?
Yes, ma'am. Regent David. Regent Finley.
Here.
Regent Pryor. Regent Solomon. Regent Sterling. Regent Williams-Brown. Regent Jackson. LCTCS representative. LSU representative.
Here.
Southern representative. UL system representative. We have a quorum, then.
Thank you, Dr. Denley. We'll now move to item number 3 of the consent agenda. Dr. Denley, at this time, will you please proceed?
Thank you so much. Yes, so today's first item is the consent agenda. We have a list of routine staff approvals, degree name changes, and items such as that. But among them, I do want to raise awareness is the approval of a certificate of applied science in cybersecurity at Southern University Shreveport. So this is a certificate that will be a stackable 2-semester program. It's 27 hours of coursework that allows students to do the preparation to take really important industry certifications, among them CompTIA Security Plus and CompTIA Linux Plus. In the board development earlier, I showed you that those were two of the certifications that are very much in demand across the cybersecurity community. So with that, staff recommends approval of the items on the consent agenda.
Members of the committee, you have heard the recommendations of the senior staff. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? There's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Any questions? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed, say nay. The motion passes.
Thank you.
We will now move to the academic programs. Dr. Dinley, you can continue.
Yeah, so the next item is the proposals for 4 new degree programs. I'll take all of these together and then make one recommendation at the end. So the first proposal is an Associate of Applied Science in Construction Science at River Parishes Community College. This is a 61 credit hour program that provides the basic skills and knowledge for entry-level construction management positions such as assistant superintendent, superintendent and assistant project manager. The program will really emphasize the applied science aspects of construction, building systems, construction documents, surveying, with the goal of training individuals to enter the workforce immediately upon graduation. Back in October 2021, Governor Edwards announced that Air Products will develop a $4.5 billion clean energy complex in Ascension Parish. That's less than 5 miles from RPCC's main campus. This project anticipates the creation of more than 2,000 construction jobs in the college's service area over the coming 3 years. So there is a real need for people with exactly this kind of experience and training. The next 2 proposals are Master of Arts in Teaching programs at Southern University, New Orleans. The first is an elementary education, special education in grades 1 through 5. And the second is a secondary education, special education, grades 6 through 12 program. So both of these MAT degrees, they are 39 credit hour programs that provide an alternative teaching certification at the graduate level for people who have a baccalaureate degree but wish to enter the teaching corps. The programs will not only provide an additional pathway for teacher certification, but will also provide training for students for teachers who specialize in teaching students with special education needs. And I guess we already heard earlier in our conversation how incredibly important adding that capacity is across our state. Then the last program is a proposal for a Master of Science in Computer Networking and Administration at Southeastern Louisiana University. Southeastern's program aims to build on the state's inventory of graduate-level computer technology programs by providing students with a curriculum based on network and system administration, including hands-on cybersecurity administration and networking principles education. So again, this is a really important addition to the systems portfolio. So with that, staff recommends approval of these 4 proposals as presented, and of course I'll be happy to answer any questions the members have. Yes, sir.
Dr. Dinley, did your research get at the demand that we have for these elementary education, special education? Can you tell us anything? Because I would imagine that is one of the more difficult roles to fill.
It absolutely
What
is.
did you learn about how many applicants will we be having for that type of program? Did you get any numbers? I mean, there's got to be a request.
Yeah, I don't have numbers to share here at this meeting today, but you're right. These are exactly the kinds of teaching roles you shared earlier in a question about STEM, and that being an incredibly important need across our state. Special education is similarly an incredibly pressing need across our state. So allowing this new avenue for people to go through and get the training to go into teaching in these roles is really, really important thing for us.
And we assume that we have the instructors, the professors in place to present this program?
We will, well, exactly. As they build this program, there are proposals to build exactly that stuff, yes.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
Dr. Denley, I've got a question. On the Masters of Arts in Teaching and Special Education, the summary I think I'm reading says we approved the letter of intent in April 2021. It then went to Bessie. It got paused. Then Bessie did some modification or revision to it, and it's coming back to us revised. Can you tell me what changed between what we approved in 2021 and what's in the content of it now, or am I reading the revision contents wrong?
Thank you.
Hi, yes, so part of our procedures, especially with programs for education programs, is they go through a dual process, a dual review with the Board of Regents and with Bessie and the Department of Education. We work very closely with the Department of Education through that process. They submitted once before. We approved the letter of intent, but when the department reviewed the program, they had additional questions that then Southern University New Orleans had to actually meet the requirements for certification. They had additional questions, and I believe it was there were some pieces missing from their application. But Bessie only approves programs twice a year, in June and October. And so because they missed that window, they had to wait and reapply at the next window, which happened to be, I don't know, April of this year, maybe, April. And so Bessie approved them. They met the requirements of Bessie. They are willing, they say that they're eligible to award certifications. And so now we're at the point where we're approving them to actually offer the program. We usually line them up in the same month, but because Bessie took some things out of order, we're a couple of months off. But again, we need both boards to agree to approving these programs. And to speak to Regent Ewing's point, Regent Ewing, according to the Department of Education and their statistics, math, science, and special education are the highest need certification areas. Many of these colleges of education are, they get extra points on their on-site review process if they are placing students in those high need areas. It's part of their accountability system process. So I think that Southern University New Orleans was meeting a need for that area.
Dr. Denley, in light of the new academic planning and forecasting we talked about this morning, is there anything when these programs require Bessie consent or common approval that we could do to get ahead of that kind of circulation so that we don't put programs in such a long process from our side?
So as part, and I guess this is the next item to talk about too, so it'll be a nice segue. Part of the questions that we ask in both the three-year planning document and actually in the proposal document as well is, are there additional approvals or accreditation kinds of questions that are incumbent on approval? So that way we know well ahead of time if it needs to be approved by Bessie or some other or needs some kind of professional accreditation, something like that. Exactly right.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
Regents, are there any other questions? Members of the committee, you have heard the recommendation from the senior staff as it relates to the academic programs. Is there a motion by the committee? Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and properly second. Is there any additional discussion or questions? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Any opposed, say nay. The motion passes. Dr. Denley, I understand that you have one additional item under the new business regarding an updating process for new programs and proposals to bring to the committee.
Yes, thanks so much. Yes, so the last item is an information item, and it really builds on action that this board took back in October 2021. You made some revisions to Policy 204 that were effective there in January 2022 that authorized the staff to develop relevant guidelines and templates and forms to support that revised policy about the way in which degree programs were proposed and also the way in which academic plans were created. So I do want to talk briefly about what it is that those new forms and that new process will be. So first of all, we have been through a very collaborative process with all of the academic leadership of the 4 systems to create the new program proposal process. And I really want to thank all of them for their hard work and willingness in creating this. The new process really, right from the very start, engages program designers with all of the aspects of what it is that we want to create a successful new degree. Just as Regent Solomon said, often there are aspects around accreditation or additional resources that we need. We want to make sure that right from the very start, we understand what it is that is the need that is being filled here. What are the ways in which this degree program fills a statewide need, either a statewide or a regional need, on an ongoing educational basis? What are the kinds of careers that this degree prepares people for? We're certainly not imagining that a student simply, this degree leads only to one particular job. In fact, what we know is often degrees lead to a lifetime of employment, and we want to make sure that people are not only prepared for that first job, but for all of the jobs in their lifetime. But we also want to make sure that we understand, well, what are the careers, perhaps the spectrum of careers that this degree is preparing students for, and what are the career outlooks for those kinds of things, so that way, when faculty create the curriculum for this degree program, that those curricular obligations can really be built in at the fabric of that curricular design, making sure, again, that we build in, just as we just saw with this new degree certificate in cybersecurity, exactly the kinds of industry certifications and the kinds of skills and preparation that we know that employers in that field would like. We also would like them to build in not only those industry-specific kinds of knowledge, or the knowledge of that particular field, but career-ready competencies. We all know that no matter what someone is going to do with the rest of their lives, critical thinking, communication, leadership, digital literacy, those kinds of what often are called soft skills, but are actually really hard, actually, in so many ways, that those kinds of skills really are built into the fabric and structure of the degree program, not somehow left perhaps to chance. And also, what are ways in which work-based experiential learning, internships or apprenticeships, clinical placements, preceptorships, undergraduate research, service learning, study abroad. We know these are incredibly pivotal and important educational experiences. What are the ways in which those are just literally built into the structure of the degree? We want them to think through the pipeline. Clearly, this degree is a pivotal point. We want to make sure that there is thought about how it is that students are attracted to that degree. Where do they come from? Do they come from sister institutions, sister programs, from K-12, from dual enrollment? What are ways in which we recruit people into that program? And then what afterwards? What are partnerships that are built with employers or with other educational experiences that students would naturally flow into? Have they thought through exactly what that educational ecosystem, that educational pipeline looks like? Of course, we've talked about resources. When it comes to staffing, when it comes to space, again, building on this question of accreditation, often accreditors have specific requirements that need to be addressed, making sure that that has been understood as we build that new degree program. And then lastly, perhaps most importantly, how does the structure of this degree program take into account the state's master planning priorities, meeting that 2030 goal and recognizing that to do that, we need to build degrees that really are accessible, that they really are built to be available to students who've perhaps not been able to meet or service in the past. Issues of affordability, making sure that we really are finding ways to lower the cost of higher education by using open education resources or credit for prior learning, like the policy that you passed just a month ago. And then lastly, how do you build the right kinds of partnerships and the right kind of structure to make sure that we really are building programs that are sustainable into the future and also at their very fabric, build in really build in the partnerships that need to be built for ongoing sustainability. So those are the new process about degree proposals, but that all then builds into what you'd envisaged back in October. Rather than approving letters of intent kind of one by one by one, instead having a much fuller picture about how it is that the degree program being proposed, like the ones we've heard today, how they fit into a fuller picture. How do they fit into a fuller picture from the institution's perspective, but how do they also fit into a fuller picture from the state's perspective? So we will be, as part of that process, asking institutions to present 3-year degree plans on an annual basis to this body for approval, and we'll be syncing that up with the process of budget proposals, because of course the reality is that creating new degree programs often, in fact probably always, has some significant kind of financial obligation. And so having those two processes happening in parallel, we believe will really be very helpful in making sure that campuses are prepared not only for the financial obligations of creating those new degree programs, but perhaps for the physical plant obligations and the ongoing obligations to the state. So we'll be asking campuses about how it is that those new degrees, how do they align their degree portfolio with the state's master planning goals, and how have they actually made the kinds of connections with industry, institutional, and community partners as they present those degree programs, which we believe will really further the state's goals. So with that, happy to answer any questions that you have about that item. As far as a timeline goes, we will be bringing to you that first set of institutional plans in the September meeting of this year. This first time around, we'll be asking for just 1-year plans, but in 2023, we will be asking the systems to bring 3-year plans, and so that's yet to come. And then when it comes to new degree programs, clearly there are degree programs that are already in the pipeline. They were submitted to management boards for review and approval on their part, and are making their way to us. We're clearly not going to ask those campuses to resubmit any of that paperwork, but new degree programs from today forward will be asking for those to be in that new format, and we'll certainly be providing both resources and also training as to how it is to fill out those forms. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have about this new process.
Thank you, Dr. Denley. Members, are there any questions at this time?
You know, we are, from time to time, we are presented with a request by a university to add a particular course. And we always ask, well, what was the demand? How much is this going to cost? Who's going to teach? Is that the way this will be brought forward to us in years coming in the form of recommendations from these individual universities?
Yeah, so what you've heard today will look very similar to what you will see in the future. It's just the information that we will be able to present to you will, I believe, present a much fuller and richer picture as to exactly all those things. What need, what resources, what are ways in which that curriculum is meeting that need. All of that picture will now be available to you as you consider that new degree program.
Well, you know, knowing the demand and having a fiscal note is a help. When we're sitting here and we just get something that sounds really good, and why aren't we doing that? Why aren't we doing it for? And of course, every university wants to do what the other one did a lot of times. But if we knew the demand that was present or forecast and a physical note of how much that was going to cost to implement that into the curriculum of the university, it would be helpful. Do you think we could get that incorporated in this?
Absolutely. Absolutely, and as we move forward, once we have these, the new materials for this, for these degree proposals, we will certainly be working with board members to make sure that the information that we provide you in your board packet really is providing the information you need to make the decisions that you need to make.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Members, are there any additional questions or other business to come before the committee? Is there a motion to adjourn? There is a motion by Regent Williams-Brown. Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded. Any additional discussion? Any questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Say nay. The motion passes. We are adjourned. Thank you, Dr. Denley.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Regent Finley. Now on to the Research and Sponsored Initiatives Committee meeting. Regent Weil is unable to attend today, so Vice Chair May, would you please call your committee to order, sir?
I'd like to call the Research and Sponsored Initiatives Committee to order. Ms. Robinson, please call the roll.
Yes, sir. Chair Weil, Vice Chair May,
Here.
Regent Finley, Regent Muir, Regent Seal,
Here.
Regent Solomon.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Members, we'll now move to item 3, Cyber Security Education Management Council Talent Development Fund update. Ms. Robinson, the floor is yours.
Yes, sir. I am pleased to introduce Greg Trahan, who is LSU's Director of Economic Development, as well as the Chair of the Cybersecurity Education Management Council, to present this item. Greg?
Thank you very much. I'd like to also acknowledge the co-chair, Ms. Susie Showen, here in the audience as well. So we've been on an aggressive pace. We just released our RFP, as Ms. Robinson will show. So revisiting this, the Act 57 of the legislature was establish a fund, and the fund allocates $1 million. And the $1 million set out to really drive cybersecurity workforce development. And these are very high ROI programs. This is not simply sending out a lot of money and hoping it works. The bar is very high for these. This is the second year of funding. Last year we allocated $1 million. We received 12 proposals. We allocated 8 proposals. This year, again, accelerated timeline. We had to move very quickly here to get this done, but we're very pleased with the results. So as you can see here, the purpose of the development fund is to provide a mechanism for donations and really industry engagement. This is really focused on what industry wants. And so we set a high bar in our RFA. We do make recommendations. We are not the allocating, we are not the distribution body. We make, the council comes together. It's comprising Louisiana Chemical Association, representing industry, as well as a number of institutions statewide for post-secondary. So we come together as a council, we create the RFA, we receive these proposals, evaluate the proposals through a strict rubric, and then we make recommendations to the board, at which point the board then determines how the funding will be allocated. Next slide, please. So I mentioned an accelerated timetable. Here you see it. We move pretty quickly, and this is intentional. This is not simply because we run out of time. It's intended to be that we don't want to look at a lot of proposals, and we just recently received our proposals for this second round of funding within the last few weeks. We expect to have recommendations finalized by next week. And the intent, again, here is to have very pointed, very productive proposals. I will mention this process allows us to do 2 things. Number one, an expedited review. But number 2, it puts a very high premium on industry engagement. So there is a 25% minimum cost sharing from industry on these proposals. And that cost sharing can cover everything from equipment, sometimes personnel, but generally this is not for, you're not standing up entirely new programs with this. That's not the intent of the funding. I will tell you just very quickly, glancing at the proposals this year, the funding, the industry funding is equipments, lab and facilities, things like industrial control technologies, laptops, software licenses for students, and seats for industry recognized certifications, all of which we've been talking about. So it's very productive funding. Again, we expect to have the funding shored up, or the recommendations shored up, by next week. At that point, we will begin negotiations with the institutions. And the last point I'll make is this, for this funding round, last year was the initial kickoff. We had 8 proposals. This year, we tried a little something different in the RFA, because a lot of campuses are always asking for new, and we introduced a track, sustained. And that sustained was, if you've kicked off something and you have metrics that show that you're really delivering some success, we want this funding, again, high ROI, to enable you to keep sustaining.
So we, just for context, we received 6 total proposals this funding round. 5 were sustained, 1 new. So I'll open the floor to questions if anyone has any.
I actually have a lot of questions, but it's so many I really don't know where to start. So I guess my first question, you talked about the places where the money was going. That is in our cybersecurity initiatives across the state, that y'all are just going to kind of pimp, or is it specific universities, cybersecurity programs, or, so?
Yes, sir. So it's post-secondary education. Post-secondary institutions are the only eligible institutions. We have received questions before about K through 12, but because the Board of Regents is who manages the council, it is post-secondary educations who are eligible to apply.
Correct. So within post-secondary education, which universities are, is it just a very general, like whoever has cybersecurity program, or, because we got several, universities that have a program, so.
Sure, it is. It's all of the institutions. So the proposals this year were, they are Fletcher Community College, it was LSU Alexandria, it was Louisiana Tech, I believe Grambling submitted. I can't remember all the partners, but it's every post-secondary institution who has cybersecurity, as well as other colleges who are looking to do something cybersecurity related. It's not necessarily a specific program. Sometimes it's just a training program for some of the certifications.
Right, but it's obviously not to stand up a program, as you mentioned, so
Yes,
I
sir.
got you. Thank you.
Other questions?
Oh, okay, thank you. I noticed I remember probably 5 years ago when the Grambling president came and asked for the major in cybersecurity. I remember, and now it's, I believe, it was new at that time, and now it seems like you said there were 8 requests or 6 requests from colleges. And do you believe there's the faculty and the resources to have so many programs in one state, or should it be culled to a few programs? Or, because I know that's a hot job market, I guess, is in that field. What's your view on curtailing it, so, or just let everybody who wants them to have it?
I don't know that I have a view on curtailing. I will say, or it's not my position to have a view on curtailing, to be more fair. What I would say is there is no faster employment opportunity than cybersecurity. There are, at this point, by any estimate, anywhere from 500 to 750,000 unfilled jobs in the U.S. The truth is that every institution in the state could put out 1,000 cyber graduates a year, and it still wouldn't be enough to make a dent across all the industries. And that's because cyber is now affecting everything from finance to medical to energy to critical infrastructure. So you need a lot of that. So I would say anyone who is willing to participate in helping develop talent and workforce in this space should be welcome to apply. The second I will say is, from the faculty standpoint, and again, it's not a lot of money. Frankly, it's $1 million. And so it's not intended to stand up new faculty. It's not intended to be, my gosh, I don't have a program and I'm going to use this to bootstrap my whole new program. It's really focused on augmenting and accelerating what you're doing for very high ROI industry-driven certifications. So where we see tremendous example of this, Bossier Parish Community College, one of the funded proposals last year, a great example was they stood up a cohort specifically of women of color who hadn't had a chance to get these certifications, and they built a cohort, 10 women now going through getting CompTIA. I think the certification was mentioned earlier. That's what they're doing. They're training them specifically in this. In LSU's case, Louisiana State Police Cybercrime Unit are now teaching undergraduate students in digital forensics. So these are unique teaching experiences in unique environments, and that's why I keep using the word high ROI in the sense that this is not standing up a new program. It's to augment existing capabilities.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
is it able to be taught cyberly? Is that a word? Through cyber?
Yeah.
Taught in what context, sir?
Like
Oh,
remotely?
digital learning. In some cases, yes, absolutely. I mean, there's online certifications where we've really seen this flourish. The most exciting proposals are, frankly, those that are hands-on. So Louisiana Tech is talking about putting gear in front of students. You need to be able to touch this digital equipment in order to interrogate it, look at it, understand what might be happening. There's industrial control systems. There's energy systems. I mean, these things are not things that all of which you can learn online, but there are some, absolutely, yes, sir, that you can learn things like enterprise architecture and protecting networks.
Do you have an assessment of the quality of our programs in this state insofar as equipping our students to fill one of those 500 to 750,000 jobs? Are we properly designed to prepare our students to qualify for those positions?
Again, I'm not really sure that I'm in a position to do that in my role at
But
LSU.
you're the only one at the table, other than Ms. Robinson.
I will say yes. I think any school that has I would defer to the provost, to Provost Lee, but I will say that across any institution, if there is some fundamental rooting in computer science, because it is a technical soundness, as well as I think the opportunity to start blending cyber into other disciplines where it doesn't have to have a technical soundness, I think that's where there will be exciting opportunities. Meaning I think that every institution could embrace cyber, not just have cyber, but embrace it. Because the intersection or the nexus of risk management and technology as it relates to medicine is a cybersecurity issue. And that's a perfect convergence of, frankly, disciplines that we have. I would say the same thing for financial systems. I would say the same thing for critical infrastructure. And when viewed through that perspective, it means that all sorts of disciplines now become cyber or cyber tangential or cyber related. Again, viewed through that lens, I think, yes, I think we absolutely have. We certainly have the challenges in the state that warrant perhaps that perspective. We have the subject matter expertise in those disciplines. The one subject matter expertise is the one we always talk about, which is, frankly, technical expertise, that STEM discipline. But to the extent that any university who has industry partnerships in medicine or banking, if they want to pivot and augment and look at it through a cyber perspective, then they can become very, very relevant in a very short amount of time.
Is there a way for the different, so if it becomes such a popular major that's needed, could the different schools share the faculty or the courses so they can be throughout the state? Or is that something that it would be more impossible to do if there is a faculty shortage in the field, but the field is exploding, such as, you could, like if LSU has it in Baton Rouge, their other campuses could offer it through the same cyberly function.
Yeah, I have.
Is that a way, or is that being?
Two thoughts, and
Yes.
Again, Provost Lee could attest to this. The faculty shortage is very real. It is exceptionally hard to find PhD level candidates who are well versed enough, who have been working at this. It's such a rapidly moving field that you don't have deep bench strength. You just don't have the expertise, and if you do, it's very expensive. One of the things I'm very optimistic about and hopeful working with Commissioner Reed, the Cybersecurity Commission, is collaboration across the institutions, because frankly, no one can own it. It's too big of a challenge, and you need novel approaches. I will say LSU, and I can speak for our institution, LSU took a fairly novel approach, which was you don't have a PhD. One of our faculty members said, well, I can't bring on a PhD. It's not that much money, so we hired an adjunct. Who did we hire as an adjunct? We hired a state policeman who does digital forensics. We hired a practitioner to teach undergraduates, because the undergraduates then are learning directly, not from a faculty, not to diminish that expertise, but from someone who's a practitioner in the field. So the answer would be, there will be a faculty shortage, just as there is a talent shortage. There's a you will continue to have that. Where I think it opens the door to is to novel approaches to bringing in instruction, particularly on the undergraduate level, for sophomores and freshmen. Because to that point, an ITS or an IT director at a hospital, frankly, is a practitioner, and he or she could be a really good instructor if that option was made available. So when you view these challenges through a cyber lens, I think it opens up the door to some interesting approaches to instruction.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Do you want to read the recommendation?
Yes, sir. So the recommendation before the board is for applications selected by the Cybersecurity Education Management Council during its May 5th meeting to be funded with a report to be provided to the board in June as to the projects that were selected for funding.
Thank you. Have you heard recommendation from senior staff? Is there a motion to approve? Motion from Regent Meir. Any second? Seconded by Regent Seal. Any discussion, any further questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. And we'll move on to item 4, fiscal year 2021 and 22 Board of Regents Support Fund Award recommendations.
All right, thank you, sir. Welcome to my favorite meeting of the year. So I would be remiss if I didn't start this meeting, this item, by not recognizing that these recommendations would not be possible without the tireless work and the dedication of our small but mighty support fund staff. Our support fund staff is 3.5 people big. When you see the scope of work that we do in a year to get these recommendations to you, you'll recognize, as I do, how incredible this staff is. So I want to invite them, if they're in the audience, to stand, please, and make the board aware of your presence. Brian Jones, who is currently our Enhancement Program Manager and will soon be moving up to Senior Grants Program Administrator. Christine Coulon-Norton, who is our Assistant Commissioner for Support Fund Administration. Jennifer Stevens, who is the newest member of our team, and she is taking over all of our contract management capacity. And the newly retired and not present Zenobia Simmons, who left at the end of this cycle after 17 years, as well as, I want to make sure to mention, Karthik Pubala-Subramanian, who provides us all of the technical support we need in addition to all of the work that he does for the agency. So thank you so much to all of this staff. It wouldn't be possible without them. All right, and with that, away we go. We will start by getting our feet under us. I will just remind you that the support fund is a constitutionally dedicated fund. We receive our monies from earnings in the Louisiana Education Quality Trust Fund, the Kevin P. Riley Louisiana Education Quality Trust Fund. Those earnings are split between Bessie and the Board of Regents, us for higher education purposes, Bessie for K-12. We are charged to do two things in the higher education space: to improve the quality of higher education and to enhance Louisiana's economic development. We do this through 4 programs that are constitutionally designated for us: Endowment of Chairs for Eminent Scholars, enhancement of academic research in agricultural departments and units, targeted R&D, and recruitment of superior graduate students. To enact these 4 programs, we have a suite of 9 sub-programs providing funding to all institutions, public and members of LAQ. It is important to note that every institution in the state of Louisiana, with the exception of one, has gotten some money from the support fund at some point in its history. Within these programs, we provide 2 different kinds of awards. We provide grant support, which is direct support for work on the campuses. This is our R&D. These are all of our R&D sub-programs, as well as departmental enhancement, the former graduate fellowships program, which is currently suspended, and our federal matching. It is important to note that the support fund is the source of matching for major statewide federal awards. So our big NASA, our NSF Track 1, the NASA EPSCoR program, LaSpace, are all matched by the Board of Regents Support Fund as part of our grant funding. We have provided, since the inception of the support fund, about $560 million in direct support to the institutions, as well as $100 million in federal matching. So the scale is quite large. Our endowment programs, it's about 30% of all of the funds that we've spent. These endowment programs provide matching funds to non-state contributions that create permanent accounts to support specific designated activities. Over the history of the support fund, we have provided about $300 million in endowment matching, and the total market value of the endowments that have been matched by the support fund is about $1.2 billion as of October reporting of last year. We are the largest single donor in the state, though we are not legally classified as a donor. We're the largest single donor in the state. Just to run through our competitive process, how do we spend these monies, this 70% and this 30%? We do it through a very detailed RFP process. We issue RFPs in July of every year, as close as we can to the 1st of July. The RFPs provide guidelines for submission, criteria for review, and scoring rubrics so that anyone who's applying to our programs knows exactly what we're looking for. After that, we have a long period where we invite anyone who wants to apply to our programs to ask any questions that they might have. We give numerous presentations to campuses, to systems. I just did one yesterday. I did a webinar with the UL system yesterday to talk about funding opportunities through the support fund and to answer any questions. Proposal submissions happen in October and November. Then we send all the proposals that we receive out for review. Nothing is reviewed internally. Nothing is reviewed by people in state. Everything is reviewed by out-of-state experts with no conflicts of interest. We do screen for that. Those consultants produce reports for us. Those reports are published around the 1st of April, and they include assessments of the projects that were submitted and funding recommendations that we bring to you today. We are now at item 6, report publication and board action. Those reports were published on April 1st this year. Now we bring the recommendations to you for action. After your, we hope, approval today, we will contract the successful projects. We will debrief the unsuccessful projects. If you submit a proposal to the Board of Regents Support Fund, you will receive feedback on that project, whether you were successful or unsuccessful. So everyone gets feedback on their projects. And that will take up all of our time until June, at which point we'll start all over again by releasing RFPs on July 1st.
Can I ask you a question? Do
Yes,
we
sir.
use the same evaluators every year?
It's a mix, but generally speaking, no. We have some repeat offenders and we have some who are new. Apologies for the nomenclature. We have some who are repeats and some who are new.
Okay, so mixed group, so you don't have the same people looking at the same thing with the same mindset every year.
Correct, but it's important to note that we do have scoring rubrics. Those scoring rubrics are provided to the applicants in the RFPs. They're also provided to the reviewers at the beginning of the review process along with the RFP, so that the reviewers are read in terms of what the programs are looking for, what weights are given to what aspects of the programs, and how they should be looking at those projects.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. And that is actually a nice segue. So if you submit to our competitive programs, how do the reviewers make funding recommendations? We do publish the criteria and scoring, and those guide all of the consultants' work. They generally look at project quality, at need, at impact, alignment with state and campus priorities. We don't want to do anything that's out of alignment with the priorities of the state going forward. The potential for success, what I call the risk to reward ratio. So you can get a really interesting idea, interesting project, but the risk is too high. The risk of failure, if you will, is too high. But you can also get a project that is amazing for the amount of money that it's going to cost. It's going to have a huge impact. And addressing program goals and requirements, that's always something that the panel will look very carefully at. Do you fit the profile?
and so on. In terms of the most important things that they look at quality, they look at need, how much do we need it, and they look at impact. How many people are we going to affect with the investment of these dollars? Each program is a little bit different because its goals are different. Each program defines and weights these general measures a little bit differently, but we publish all of that ahead of time. And the external evaluators use the criteria that we publish in their assessment, but also in the debriefing. So everybody who gets debriefing is going to get debriefing on those criteria. For the non-competitive awards, we have one non-competitive program that's endowed professorships. It's a much more straightforward process where each campus is guaranteed 2 matches per year at minimum. The application materials are set. It's basically affidavits and assurances, making sure they have the money on hand and they're going to be following, they know the guidelines and will follow the guidelines. Everything has to fit, obviously, within the support fund standards set in the Constitution. If we have more money than is needed for the 2 guaranteed slots, if campuses don't submit for their 2 slots every year, we fund around the list of proposals or the list of submissions until we run out of money. So that's what you'll see when you see that some campuses are getting 2, whereas this year the largest number is 9 slots matched. The reason for that is that we're funding around until we hit our budget ceiling, the budget that we set in our annual plan and budget. So what did the competition look like in terms of enacting these lofty goals? We received 406 proposals. It's a very large competition. 35 campuses out of 43 eligible submitted proposals this year. We got requests for $40 million in funding. We have the funds available to support about $9.4 million in first-year funds in the competitive process. What we do with these numbers is we try to look at success rates. That gives us the best idea of what the competition looks like, how competitive our programs are, and what it takes to be successful. So in terms of the competitive proposals, this is everything except endowed professorships. You'll see 120 projects are recommended for funding. That's about a 30% success rate. That's actually pretty high for the support fund. 29 campuses are recommended for funding. 83% of all campuses that submitted to these programs are recommended for funding. It's really good to put that number against the project success rate. 30% of projects, but 83% of campuses. So the funds are actually very well distributed among the eligible campuses. In terms of endowed professorships, which is the non-competitive program, again, this is a funding guarantee program, so 100% of campuses are funded through this program. We received requests from 20 campuses, funding 76 slots, which is almost half of everything that was submitted. Only 2 campuses have slots remaining, and there are 94 slots remaining. The balance of those slots at LSU and the remaining slots at Grambling. And the reason for Grambling's large submission of slots this year was your action last June to allow campuses to submit forward projects that were donations that were begun before the match rate changed from 60-40 to 80-20, but not completed until after that match rate change. So that drove this submission, this large submission from Grambling, and they're very appreciative of that action. So with that, what we are asking you to approve today are the recommended first-year awards, 199 total projects for a total of $11.392 million. I'll be happy to take any questions.
Very good, thank you. Any further questions? All right.
I've got a question.
Do you think in the future if we have more one-time money, could that money be added to this fund to boost our ability to meet more of these demands? We've got $40 million in request, and we've got $11.5 million.
Typically, the support fund is a closed loop because it's a constitutionally designated fund. But the legislature in well, the late 90s and early 2000s, before the Great Recession, the legislature would provide some supplementary funds for matching of chairs and professorships. They have ceased to do that. They haven't done that since 2007. But in terms of one-time money that's received by Regents, the issue is expending by the end of the fiscal, any kind of restrictions on state general funds. It can be difficult with multi-year awards to do that. And we prepay, which is something that's hard to do with monies that don't come out of the support fund. There's a whole mechanism under the support fund that actually cuts a lot of the bureaucracy involved in expending of funds. And it's that bureaucracy that makes it a little bit complicated to provide additional funds at the end of a cycle like this. It's not impossible, it's just complicated.
Well, if we just had more funds, we would probably be able to entice more people to set up endowments and scholarships and so forth. And
Well, in terms of the endowments, one thing I would say is that we will bring a report to you on our endowment programs that was done by some out-of-state experts, just looking at programmatic aspects. We'll bring that to you probably in June. We are very well covered in terms of endowments for faculty in the state. We have, of the 3,200 endowments that we've matched, about 2,800 of those are faculty endowments, which is very high looking nationally. Now, the dollar amounts of a lot of those are quite low because our endowed professorships start at $100,000, which is nationally very, very low. But in terms of enticing more donors, we do have, it is a historic problem and it is an intractable problem that we have more submissions than can be funded.
we have
And
a lot of
whenever we
funds
clear
that are
them,
waiting
which
there
we've
to be
done.
matched. We have a lot of funds that are with universities that are waiting to be, in foundation and so forth, waiting to be matched. Isn't that correct?
We have a large number of endowments waiting to be matched, but a small number of campuses that are waiting. So it's a problem for a small number of campuses. Yes, sir.
Regent May, I've got a question. Carrie, can you tell us, if you look at the program over a couple years' time, perhaps, is there any trends or outliers that you think are worth flagging to the board about programs that are seeking greater and greater demand or lesser and lesser demand within the support fund that would help us imagine kind of where the future allocations should be considered?
Yes, so typically our R&D programs get the largest share of submissions. Our enhancement program gets the second largest share of submissions. The endowment programs, proportionally, the success rate is higher across all of our endowment programs than across our grant programs. But it's hard to say over the last couple of years. We are waiting for the pandemic stresses to level off, because what we've seen is a drop in proposal submissions, particularly in the grants programs. That's why we've seen, I think over the last 5 years, before the pandemic, we were seeing success rates around 15 to 18%. So you had a 1 in 5 at best chance of receiving an award if you applied. In the endowment programs, it's been pretty stable. You have basically a 1 in 2 chance. You have about a 50% chance of getting your money in the year that you submit. So it's hard to say whether that is a trend or a hiccup.
Gotcha. And in terms of our connection to or awareness of the outcomes of especially the competitive projects that we invest in, is there a way we measure the return on investment for the state that we put into these? I mean, the range, I read almost all of them because it was incredible. Just like the range and the depth and the ingenuity of these proposals are pretty compelling. I imagine some could be making tremendous impact in the state. And if we are actually, in fact, the largest donor, quote unquote, even though we're not a donor, how we measure the return on investment for the state would be interesting to consider in how we market the state more widely as a as a resource for talent development or advancing the economy.
And we do that in a variety of ways through our annual and final reporting for all the projects are required to report to us. If they're multi-year, they do it every year, and then they have a final report. If they're an annual project, they have one report at the end of the year. We collect information on how many students they're impacting, how many faculty they're impacting, grants out of state or non-state grants collected as a result of the funding, hires as a result of the funding, all of those kinds of factors we look at in determining. It's hard, of course, to roll up over such a large number of projects what that means, but the last time we did it for R&D, the monetary return on investment was about $10 for every dollar we spent. So if we fund a research project, it's generating about $10 in external funding, whether that's federal funding or industry support or other NGO support.
It might be something worth considering more fully with Meg and the skills and the communications team. I understand it goes in the report, but I tend to think there's probably not as much awareness as there could be about the impact that this board's investment and this fund's investment have in our state. And when we go make the case for higher ed, perhaps in future times where we have a less favorable climate, being sure that we're talking about the impact that even these limited funds have could be pretty compelling. Look, the one that stood out to me, and it was only because I had a personal connection, was, I mentioned you at dinner last night when I saw the Maurice Ruffin's book I think we're investing $47,000 in or something like that into Professor Ruffin's, new writing, and you think that the guy just wrote a book that was like on every bestseller list. I don't know that Louisiana citizens know, perhaps, if this book that he writes is going to end up on a similar list, that we had a hand, our state had a hand in it. And that's just one of the hundreds he reviewed. It's amazing to think what's possible.
It raises an important point about the way that we can collect data, because these are grants, and so they're issued by contract. That contract terminates usually before the work appears, or because timescales, especially for research, are huge. It's hard to measure within our grant timescale the full impact of a project, because the impact is going to, we certainly hope the impact will far outlast our contract. And for the endowments, how do you even begin to measure each faculty member who holds that endowment, which exists in perpetuity? Each faculty member is generating external funding, training students, participating in community outreach and support. A lot of our endowments are at the medical centers. So those are people who are providing treatment in our communities. How do you measure the impact of that kind of support? But it's certainly something we have thought about, and we are committed to finding better and better ways to do.
Any further questions? You've heard the recommendation. Is there a motion to approve? Motion by Regent Seal. Second? I'm sorry.
Finley.
Regent Finley, thank you. Any discussions, any further questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Is there any other business to come before the Research and Sponsored Initiatives Committee?
No, sir.
Hearing none, is there a motion to adjourn? Moved by Regent Finley, seconded by Regent Solomon. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you. So, planning, let's see where we are now. We're moving quickly. Oh, here we go. Planning, that's where we are. Okay, that's where I was. Okay. Oh, he's back up again. Okay. Okay, so now on the statewide programs committee meeting. Regent Ewing, can you please call your committee to order?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning. I believe it is still morning. We need to call our committee to order. Ms. Robertson, would you call the roll, please?
Yes, sir. Chair Ewing,
Here.
Vice Chair McDonald, Regent Finley. Here. Regent Jackson. He's here somewhere. Regent Meir. Present. Regent Pryor.
Here.
Regent Weil. You have a quorum.
Thank you very much. When I looked at the agenda, it gave me a little bit of concern, and I want to thank the staff for helping me get a little bit more comfortable about what we're doing. I tell you, I go back to 1998 when I was a good friend with Pat and Phyllis Taylor and Dr. Kaye, and we set up the TOPS program. It began in the House. We passed it in the Senate. It has become a very popular program. It has been an incentive for students to take a more rigorous course in math and science and English and prepare themselves to make a good ACT score to go on to our four-year institutions. So having had that experience and that background along with Regent McDonald all those years ago, I guess when we hear TOPS, we kind of perk up a little bit, and that's what I did. But since the last couple of days, I have appreciated the attention to create a better understanding with me of what we're doing. So at this time, I would like to ask Dr. Denley to go ahead and make the presentation on item 3 in our agenda.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. So today we will be presenting the list of academic programs for approval for TOPS Tech for academic years 22-23 and 22-23-24. I want to put that in a little context. So back in 2015, Act 230 amended the TOPS legislation around the TOPS Tech program, which is a specific part of the TOPS funding family, the TOPS Tech program provides funding for students who are studying really workforce-aligned associates and short-term programs. And so that amended language provides or requires the Board of Regents and the Louisiana Workforce Investment Council to establish which associate degree and short-term education credentials would be available to TOPS Tech recipients. So on an annual basis, there is an interagency council that looks through all of the different kinds of programs which might be made available in this process and then makes recommendations to the Workforce Investment Council, which then is brought in turn to this body for approval for students to receive that support. It doesn't in any way make changes to the eligibility, which students are eligible for TOPS Tech assistance and support. Instead, it is us curating, if you will, which degree programs are available for them to receive that support. So the Interagency Partnership, you can see, is very broad: Board of Regents, Department of Education, and LCTCS, and you can see all of the representatives. And as I say, since 2015, they have brought those recommended programs to this body for approval. The difference this year, and that's, I think, maybe a little small for us to see, but the difference this year is that there are a set of academic programs, and the recommendation, I believe, is to approve those programs not for a single year, but for 2 academic years to provide some stability. But also they are recommending the addition for the first time of some short-term industry-based credentials, some short-term non-credit programs, and that is a difference from our procedures in the past, where all the programs in the past that have been recommended have all been academic programs, all 4-credit programs. If you look through the list of programs that are being recommended in that non-credit side, you can see actually some of the things that we've been talking about this morning. You can see training in web development and in cybersecurity and in working in healthcare and in working in education. So these are really, I think, important additions to the portfolio of opportunities that we are beginning to make available to our students. And of course, it really is very much in line with the goals that we have for 2030. We are now, for the first time, building the infrastructure for us to be able to count and recognize as part of the picture that we have for education across the state, these non-for-credit credentials, so that way we really can recognize not only all of the credentials of value that people are receiving as part of an education that is post-secondary education. Many of these credentials and the ones that are being recommended, they really do lead to incredibly high-need industry settings and very lucrative salaries as well. And so what we are recommending this time around is that, yes, those academic programs will be we are recommending that those are approved for those coming 2 years, but we are also recommending that these non-for-credit short-term credentials will also be added to the list of available programs, but the funding for those programs would not exceed $1 million in this coming year. So with that, and we are recommending that be for a single year. So the academic programs for 2 years, but the non-credit programs be for a single year. This is the first time that we have added these not-for-credit programs, and so we certainly want to make sure that we study well exactly how it is how that works, and we will, of course, come back to you next year and talk about how successful this new initiative has been. So with that, I make that recommendation.
Okay, I have some questions, and I guess for the record, Dr. Denley, and first of all, I want to thank the commissioner for making that adjustment on the one-year trial and $1 million limit. I think that gives us time to really look and see what we're doing. I think we do not need to create questions about the integrity of the original plan, which has been so popular and, quite honestly, so meaningful to so many students. Most of those students who gain those top scholarships and go to four-year universities do graduate. So we don't need to take away that incentive. And I don't think anybody is. We're just trying to be, I guess, pure, not only in our intent, but in our practice. Do you mind if I just pose a couple of questions to you, maybe 3 questions, for the record?
Sure.
You mentioned, but by what authority do we, as a Board of Regents, have to make this addition to what I would classify as a subgroup?
Sure. So this is actually Statute 175002, subsection D, Part A, where it reads that, let me see, sorry, my eyes are no longer as good as they used to be. There we go. That it is in associate's degrees or other short-term training and education programs that are aligned to state workforce priorities as determined by the Board of Regents and the Louisiana Workforce Investment Council, that these awards shall be given. So this list that you are being asked to approve today is exactly the Board of Regents approving actually what the Workforce Investment Council approved just last week, the new list of those associate degree and other short-term training and educational programs. So that's the basis of the...
What is your understanding of short-term training, and how is that developed? How many hours will a student have to take to gain certification in whatever they're seeking?
Yeah, so the programs that are being proposed today, they are all programs that really do meet the most high priorities when it comes to the workforce needs in the state. Full-time for these short non-credit programs will be understood to be 360 clock hours, but the range of programs that are being provided today range from actually 48 hours, which is for one of the cybersecurity programs, all the way over to 1,200 hours, which is in a welding program. So there's a wide variety of the number of clock hours that these shorter term programs can comprise, but 360 hours would be considered to be a full-time load in any given semester.
So from research, we developed the courses that will be offered and the amount of time it would take for someone to become proficient in that curriculum.
That's exactly right. And actually what we have built on is work that was already carried out as part of the MJ Foster program. This is, of course, the funding source and the structure of this program is completely separate from the MJ Foster program, but in many ways the aims are the same. I think you know that to receive funding for the MJ Foster program, you have to be at least 21 years old and also be going to follow one of these same industry-aimed high-need credentials. That list of credentials that were created for the MJ Foster program had a significant amount of due diligence to make sure that those programs really did meet all of those aims. Those are that is the list of programs which is being also presented to this body today, but then being made available not only to students who are 21 years or older, but to those TOPS Tech students who will of course be younger, but coming right out of high school, 18 or 19 years old.
What are the eligibility requirements? Would you please state those?
Yeah, so for TOPS Tech, there is requirements about being from an approved high school here in Louisiana. All of the public high schools are on that list, but there are other criteria that BESI actually has to approve that high school. And then you have to have taken all of the 19 hours of the core, and also I believe a 17 on the ACT, where there is also a possibility of having a workforce keys score. So none of that has changed. That top tech requirement has been in place for some number of years, and nothing you're approving today changes any of those.
And that applies to those who take non-credited courses.
I'm sorry, sir?
Does that also apply to those who take non-credited courses?
Exactly. You would still have to qualify for TOPS Tech, just the same.
It was determined what programs we would offer, and as I understand, that is based on research of what the demand from the workforce is out there.
That's exactly right. So that was part and parcel of, I know, the consideration from the MJ Foster analysis, but also this interagency council also then looked at that data in making the recommendation that they are bringing to you today.
And the anticipated cost for the first year is $1 million. Not that cost, but that's what we're going to contribute out of TOPS. Well, are these same students eligible for Pell and Go?
So the students who are going through the short-term programs will not be eligible for Pell because those short-term programs are not Title IV eligible programs, and so they're not eligible for, I believe, and I'm going to need some help as to whether or not they're eligible for Go. I'm sorry that I don't.
But doesn't Go track Pell?
Somebody's going to have to help me as to whether or not they're eligible for Go.
So you have to, I think Dr. Boutte had a call to take. You have to receive Pell to receive Go.
Oh, then
That's
right?
what I thought.
So then,
So the only source is going to be,
this will be, yeah.
what other sources would there be? I mean, the $1 million, but what other sources are there? I mean, I know of the MJ Foster $10 million that's anticipated.
I think unless someone corrects me, for the vast majority of these programs, these would be the only funds that would be available. Because of the fact that these short-term programs are not Title IV eligible programs, these students are not eligible for any federal financial aid, not only Pell, but other forms of federal financial aid as well. To be eligible for the MJ Foster program, they would have to be older. They're too young to receive that support. So actually, these students would be eligible for TOPS Tech. What we are doing today is saying they are eligible for they would have been eligible for TOPS Tech support to be part of an academic associate's degree program in the past. What we're opening the door to today is that those students are able to receive those TOPS Tech funds also for this non-credit short-term program. So we're basically we're expanding the kinds of choices that they might be able to make in the selection of their program, not on whether or not they're eligible.
Well, how many students do we have in TOPS Tech?
So it's somewhere in the 1,000 to 2,000 student range each year?
1 to 2,000?
Yes, sir.
I believe the 20, here we go. Academic year 21, 22, the state of Louisiana had 1,018 students, and the amount awarded total was $187,000.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
I guess my last question would be, and I appreciate your patience,
Of course.
but I can tell you from the number of people that in this state that are interested in TOPS because of what it has done, I can't imagine some of us not having a question or two. And if we've gone on record and we know what we've done, I know personally I'm going to feel better about it if I can remember it. But my last question is, as a board, are we pretty well assured that adding this new group, subgroup, will in no way now or potentially in the future infringe on or reduce the funds available for what we have traditionally thought of as the TOPS program, designed as a merit program available to all who could make the grades and get an ACT and go to the four-year institution?
Yeah, I think we can absolutely be assured of that.
I thank you very much, and I do appreciate your patience,
I
but
appreciate it too. These are great questions.
I've been around a while, and I think it's good that we have a good understanding on this board and that we have that pretty well documented. It may just pass over and summer's here, nobody may pay attention, but you wait till fall. People are gonna wait, wanting, is the money still there, and did we do anything to change it? I'm comfortable, and I appreciate the commissioner making the amendment of the one-year trial and the $1 million.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
You have a question? I'm sorry.
I do, Regent Union. I just wanted to follow up and ask Dr. Denley, based on Regent Ewing's questions and comments. I did not see this as an addition to what is required. I saw it as being inclusive of what the statute already says, because the language says it covers students in short-term training and educational programs. So I felt it was applicable, and it was aligned, the language that it's aligned to state and workforce priorities. And I would add, in addition to that, it is also in line with our mission and the master plan. And so I thought that language is what makes this possible, and is not an addition, and it is not a request to expand the idea of what short-term training is. So I just want to make sure that I'm on point with that, because as Regent Ewing says, somebody may come back again and look at this, and we should be clear on what we're trying to do here.
Yeah, so I completely concur that language that talks about short-term credentials as well as associate's degrees, this is exactly what it is that we are actually for the first time filling out, well, what are those short-term credentials? And now we are making those short-term credentials available to TOPS Tech recipients.
You feel it's covered in the statute as it exists now?
Yes, I do.
Are there any other comments or questions? I do want to thank you, and I would also add, I think this whole group is looking for as many ways as we can to facilitate more support for more people to get into the education pipeline. And obviously, if you can teach someone a skill in a shorter period of time, it's going to cost them less money, us less money, and get them on the job corps. So my concern was, were we violating the integrity of the original TOPS program? And I'm comfortable that we'll go on and have a trial year. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, let's see, what else we got to do here today? I need a motion.
Thank you.
I need a motion to accept the report presented by Dr. Denley to approve for TOPS Tech during academic years 2022 for this specific change. And then I guess we will need another proposal to go with 2000. Are there other programs that need to be, or is this it?
I think we
All in one? Okay. As amended for 1 year.
Regent, you and I move that we accept the senior staff I move that we accept the senior staff recommendation approval of the revised top tech academic program list for the 2022, 2023, and 2023 and 2024 academic years, as well as the approval for the one-year inclusion of high-demand non-credit programs.
Regent, you and I'll second that motion.
Wait, are we approving for 2 years or are we approving for 1 year?
We're approving the academic programs for
2 years, but then we're also,
with a trial
okay,
for over
I just
1
want to, that's fine. Do we have a second on that motion?
I'll make the second.
Okay, Regent Meyer makes a second. Any further discussion? All those committee members in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None opposed. Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
That is, let's see, what else we got here now?
We have one item under other business, and I am inviting Susie Showen from the Louisiana Department of Economic Development to present that item.
Excellent. Thank you, Carrie. And thanks to the Commissioner, Chairman Temple, and the Regents for letting me talk to you today about something that I think is easily one of the most exciting projects that I've been involved with in my 10 years with Louisiana Economic Development, and I'm really looking forward to what I get to tell you today. So first of all, I'm Susie Showen with Louisiana Economic Development, and we took the lead on developing a submission to the Good Jobs Challenge, which comes through the Economic Development Administration's grant funding programs through the American Rescue Plan Act. I'm going to spoiler a couple of things for you. We did submit the application with the Board of Regents as the lead applicant and as the fiscal agent. So we helped to develop the submission, but the Board of Regents is actually the fiscal agent and the lead applicant for that. We submitted for $25 million in funding. Included is also a $5 million match commitment from Governor Edwards. We probably will not hear on the award decision until probably mid-July or so on. So we did do the submission. The feds received, I believe, 509 submissions. They have quite a job in front of them in terms of evaluating those. And so we do not yet have a notice of award and won't for a while. But the submission itself and the concept is exciting enough that we wanted to make sure that all of you were fully informed of what we will be doing in this interim period before we hear about funding. So let me start with just an overview of the Good Jobs Challenge itself. This is part of the same suite of funding that includes Build Back Better, not the Build Back Better infrastructure bill, but the Build Back Better grant funding opportunity and some other better-known funding opportunities through the American Rescue Plan Act. It is through the Economic Development Administration, so it has a specific economic development focus, but it is a workforce development funding opportunity, and that's really unprecedented from the EDA, and they're very excited about this opportunity, and there are some features of it that really show the economic development aspect of it. The core of this program is about putting people to work, and it's about, rather than degree completion, it is about measuring that impact in the workforce. It does require very intensive industry partnerships to include industry commitments to hire. And it is based around focusing on target populations, which in our instance includes people in poverty, for which we're using the ALICE criteria, people of color, and rural populations. It also provides funding for wraparound services, which is also very unusual. So services that help those target populations succeed in the education and training world and then into employment in places where they may previously have faced challenges. Some key information here. Again, I mentioned the industry partnerships. So the sectoral partnerships with particular industries are the core of the entire concept for the Good Jobs Challenge. Applicants can choose whether to include one sectoral partnership
or multiple sectoral partnerships. If there are multiple sectoral partnerships, that is multiple industries represented, then there must be a lead entity that oversees those sectoral partnerships. So you have lead entities that oversee all the sectoral partnerships, and then each sectoral partnership is led by what they term a backbone organization. This is a 3-year grant, and there are 3 phases of funding that may be applied for. And that includes system development, where you put together those sectoral partnerships, program design, where those industry-led sectoral partnerships help to create the programs that will be implemented, and then the implementation phase, the program implementation, and that's where you're actually putting people through these programs and into jobs. In 3 years, we need to get through all 3 of those phases, and that's really challenging, and it does mean that the programs we're going to be looking at are going to be shorter-term programs, right? They need to be shorter-term programs that will get people through the program and into employment within sort of the overall sphere of a 3-year program. As I mentioned, we did ask for $25 million as a statewide submission. We felt that that made sense. That is the maximum allowable ask under the Good Jobs Challenge. I mentioned that there were about 500 applications out there, and those were largely regional based, that is smaller than a state submission. We were one of relatively few statewide submissions, and we do feel like that positions us very well. I'd mentioned the sectoral partnership and the grant funding stages, and you could just see on this slide that there's a good representation of that system lead entity with the multiple sectoral partnerships underneath it, and that is the approach that we chose, to go with multiple sectoral partnerships with the Board of Regents as the system lead entity. And now I'm going to get to the really good part, which is exactly what our concept was. So what we've chosen to do is base our sectoral partnerships in the 8 major economic regions of the state. So each region has its own backbone organization and its own industry sector focus. And I want to emphasize that we selected these industry focuses really carefully, but an important note here is that the frameworks that we're building out through this process do not need to be restricted to an individual industry sector. So for the purposes of the grant, the funding that may come from the grant and the metrics that we will need to report back are focused on a particular industry sector. But we view these frameworks as being broadly applicable across multiple industry sectors in each region of our state. And this concept is something that many of us at multiple agencies in the state have been talking about for a very long time as a really important part of meeting our goals as a state in terms of economic development and putting people to work, alleviating poverty, and working with our target populations to get them to the place where they need to be from an employment perspective. So we believe really strongly that this concept is powerful and sustainable and extends to multiple industry sectors in each region of our state. But back to our actual submission. As you can see, we selected the regional economic development organizations that are our LAD partners in most regions of the state, but in a couple regions of the state, we did select the community and technical college campus to serve as the backbone organization. Each one of these backbone organizations will be responsible for convening industry partners to build the sectoral partnership, and then also bringing to the table training and education partners, the workforce development boards, the wraparound service providers, and experts in reaching target populations, as well as other community partners in each of those areas. And if you look at this slide, you can see the selected
industries that each one of these backbone organizations are planning on focusing on. Yes, sir.
Obviously, there was some significant thought that went into why, you know, Fletcher was alternative energy and Louisiana Delta was utilities infrastructure. So if you maybe, as you're talking about this, could maybe just real quick
Absolutely.
speak to
Let me
that.
talk about that right now. That's a great segue. These industry sector, the industry sectors that were selected for each of the sectoral partnerships were chosen because they offer significant unmet demand in that region. The wages are good in that region, and they are the sort of jobs where we can get a significant number of people from target populations realistically into jobs with a short turnaround. And you may be looking at hospitality in Southwest Louisiana, which is the one that everybody wants to ask about. So let me talk about that one specifically. That was a really serious conversation out there. But the heavy industry that we know is really in need of workers in Southwest Louisiana is not going to be easily able to hire folks within a less than 2-year time frame, coming from the target populations and going through short-term training. Generally speaking, they're looking for people with a number of years of experience in the field, as well as, generally speaking, 2 years or more of training.
So when you say, when it says obviously backbone, that means that that's going to be where it's focused and where it's the general area, but that doesn't mean that it won't be offered in other areas as well?
Well, let me explain that a little bit. So the backbone organization is the entity that's responsible for convening the industry partners. So in Southwest Louisiana, that's the Southwest Louisiana Economic Development Alliance. And that's George Swift and R.B. Smith, if you know those folks. They're the ones who would be heading that up. They would be convening members of the hospitality industry to come together, identify the occupations that are most in demand for their industry, where they want to focus the training programs that will come out of this project. So those industry partners will work with the education and training partners, with the economic development partners, and with the workforce development partners to put those programs together. And they will commit to hire, not necessarily every completer of those programs, but they will make a commitment to hire people who successfully complete those programs. And that, as I said, is a major part of this story. However, that framework that's being built there can also apply to other industry sectors in Southwest Louisiana. So for the purposes of the grant, the funding of the grant and the metrics from the grant will focus on hospitality, but you've got everybody at the table, right? And there is absolutely nothing to stop you from bringing in your other employers, from having those conversations with them as well. And that's a major benefit that we see coming from this. And there's also nothing that prevents our folks in New Orleans from also focusing on the hospitality industry, although for the purposes of this grant, they're going to focus on the technology industry.
Gotcha. And my last question, you mentioned that it was not normal that wraparound services were included in something like this. What are some of those wraparound services entail?
So the ones that often come up are childcare and transportation. So we know that those are significant obstacles to people being able to participate fully in the workforce. There are others, and there are no restrictions in the grant about which wraparound services the sectoral partnerships might select. So there is an option for potentially addressing other challenges in the workforce, like substance abuse and some mental health issues. There really are some opportunities, I think, to move in some pretty interesting directions with this.
Thank you.
And now I'm going to wrap up by promising what's to come between now and the moment at which we are informed of our likely award, right? There is much to be done in system development, and the level of enthusiasm that we have around this concept is really significant. We've had an extraordinary influx of industry support, including, I'm happy to say, our friends at Entergy. And we are very interested in moving forward with this momentum. I literally didn't talk to anybody who heard about this concept and said, hey, that's a really bad idea. I don't want to be part of it. So there really is some energy here. So we will, with Dr. Reed and her staff, be moving forward with the system development concept. This is work that we need to know, that we need to do, that we know that we need to do, and the system development part of it does not require a significant amount of funding. So we feel confident that we can move forward, putting together these sectoral partnerships, bringing our friends to the table under a big tent, and talking about how we move forward. So we will be doing that, and I look forward to coming back to you soon, I hope, with more details.
Thank you, Ms. Schoen, for that good report. These 8 districts were set up to recognize the individual needs that might occur across the state in different geographical areas. And it's interesting to see these recommendations from those particular groups.
Yep.
But it did have merit in what it was doing, because some things in New Orleans are not necessarily that appropriate for some things in Quitman, Louisiana. In fact, very little. But are there any other questions? Any questions for Ms. Schoen? Thank you for that good report. Do you have any comment, Ms. Robinson?
No, sir.
Well, we're about to wrap up here then, aren't we?
Yes, sir.
Okay, is any further business come before the committee? Hearing none, do I hear a motion that we adjourn the committee?
So moved.
So moved. Got a second? Got a move and a second. Okay. Any objection to adjourning and going to eat or whatever we do next? All right. We are adjourned.
Thank you, Regent Ewing. Next up, before we take a quick break and then come back together for our board meeting, is Planning, Research, and Performance Committee. Regent Sterling, please call the committee to order, ma'am.
Thank you, Chairman Temple. I'd like to call the Planning, Research, and Performance Committee to order. Dr. Craig, would you please call the roll?
Yes, ma'am. Regent Sterling.
Here.
Regent Williams-Brown. Here. Regent Finley. Here. Regent Levy. Here. Regent McDonald. Regent Perez. Regent Pryor.
Here.
Regent Weil. We have a quorum.
Thank you. We will move to item 3, the consent agenda. Dr. Craig, please proceed.
Sure. The first item on the PRP agenda is the consent agenda. We have before you this morning 4 different institutions. One institution, California Southern University. It's a private institution. This is an initial application. They are accredited by the Western Association of Schools and Colleges, and at this point have not enrolled any Louisiana students. They are up for initial licensure. In addition, we have 3 renewal applications for licensure. One is Alliant International University. It's accredited by the Western Association of Schools and Colleges. We have Johns Hopkins University, which has a local campus at in Bossier City, on Bossier City Community College campus. It is a summer program. They are accredited by the Middle States Commission on Higher Education. The third institution is the Chicago School of Professional Psychology. This particular institution is actually located on Xavier's campus, and they currently enroll 81 Louisiana students. And senior staff recommends the board approve the items on the consent agenda.
Thank you. Members, are there any questions for Dr. Craig? You've heard the recommendation. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
So moved by Regent Brown and second by Regent Finley. Any discussion, any questions? All those in favor signify by saying yea.
Yay.
Any opposed? Then our motion passes. We will move to item 4, the 2021 Health Works Commission Annual Report. Dr. Craig is joined by Melvin Baker, our Assistant Commissioner for Student Success, Dr. Bronwyn Doyle, who chairs the Nursing Supply and Demand Council, and Dr. Ali Bustamante with the Impact Econ Research. Thank you all.
Thank you, Regent Sterling. Today I'm just going to provide a really brief overview of the structure of this report. Before we begin the presentation, I just wanted to remind the board that the Health Works Commission is a legislatively created commission. It is charged as a collaborative working group with coordinating those resources specific to the healthcare workforce development. The membership of this commission has post-secondary institution. It also has legislative representation as well as some healthcare organizations. The Board of Regents provides the necessary staff to support this commission. And since 2019, this commission has really prioritized increasing the capacity sizes of our nursing programs in the state through the reinstatement of a program called the Nurse Capitation Program, which provides additional funding to our systems to increase the class sizes of their nursing programs. Similarly, recently through the HERO Fund, they've created a similar structured program for a few allied health programs as well. The Commission has also provided tuition scholarships to faculty to increase the number of faculty at the doctoral level. They've also provided testing waivers to LCTCS for nurse aides to obtain their certification. And they've also funded the upcoming Simulation Expo that will be hosted this Friday, April 29th at the University of Louisiana at Lafayette. That is hosted by another subset of the commission, which is the Simulation Medical and Training and Education Council. And so this commission is required to submit an annual report, and we wanted to bring these findings to the board because we acknowledge the pandemic has further heightened the need for the nursing shortage in Louisiana, as mentioned earlier in the presentation related to funding. So this is occurring in Louisiana as well as nationwide, and really this report reveals additional strategies must be taken for us to mitigate the healthcare personnel shortages. And so this is a baseline report related to the supply and demand, and it's going to be used to prioritize short-term and long-term recommendations for the commission. This year, the report has two sections. The first part is the Nursing Supply and Demand Council report, which is a subset of the commission, joined here by Dr. Bronwyn Doyle, who serves as the chair of that council, as well as the director of workforce for St. Tammany Health System and an adjunct professor at Franciscan University. And then part two of the report, we contracted with Impact Econ Research to conduct a healthcare workforce landscape report, and this will be presented by Dr. Ali Bustamante. And so again, the Nursing Supply and Demand Council is a subset of the Health Works Commission. We're joined by two other members of the council in the audience today, and they are charged with studying all aspects of supply and demand related to advanced practice registered nurses, licensed practical nurses, as well as nurse aides. And so with that, I will now transition and pass along the presentation to Dr. Bronwyn Doyle. Dr. Doyle.
I don't think you're on, Bronwyn.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good to see you. So I'm going to give you a high-level overview of some of the statistics that we review with nursing supply and demand. I'll put the caveat out there that we have not met yet this year, so the data that I'm reporting on is from 2020. However, I have included and will include in my verbal remarks some of the 2021 data to help support the decisions and so forth for today. So first of all, we'll start with advanced practice registered nurses. And for those of you who may not know exactly who that is, those are, APRNs are anyone from a clinical nurse specialist, a nurse practitioner, a CRNA, or a nurse midwife. Those are some examples. We know there's a tremendous need for APRNs, especially in rural areas of our state, where there are often underserved individuals. Unfortunately, in this area, in the last year, we have seen a decrease, both in the number of students admitted to our APRN programs, as well as a decrease in our graduates. There's speculation about why that may be, but certainly the pandemic, we believe, has had an effect as these experienced RNs are able to go back into the workforce to help, as well as earn very high dollars in this current market. Let's see, next slide, we're going to talk about the registered nurses. This is of particular importance right now. So good news, the Board of Regents has actually done a lot of work to help us to increase the supply of RNs. Partly here, we see a 29% increase in the number of students applying. The pandemic actually did one good thing for nursing, and that is it is driving people to have an interest in healthcare and want to come to their fellow citizens' aid in that capacity. There's also been a 25% increase in the number of students admitted. We believe that's largely because of the capitation funding that was approved and has been managed by Board of Regents, and so that has been greatly appreciated. On the graduate side, we see there's a 4% increase since 2016. I'm happy to report, though, that if we look at our 2021 data, there's actually been a 30% increase since 2017. So this is very good news. That means that our capitation funding and our increases in enrollment are leading to increased number of graduates. Okay, licensed practical nurses. Licensed practical nursing, we have seen an increase in the number of qualified, or the percentage of qualified applicants who are admitted. However, we've seen a decrease in the actual number of applicants and the number admitted to these programs. We have also seen that unfortunately, there's been a 20% increase in withdrawal from LPN programs in the last 2 years. So that's not good news from that LPN side. I did speak with members at the PN board, and they cite the COVID pandemic as one of those reasons for that decrease. Additionally, there has been a decrease in the number of graduates, unfortunately, from these programs. Of course, as enrollment declines, so too do the graduates. So this is something to keep an eye on. This next slide talks about our current workforce. I don't want to be an alarmist. You see a 5.1 decrease in the number of RNs, but there may be an explanation for that number. And that is because we've entered into the compact licensure or multi-state license. When we did that, there are nurses who live in other states, Mississippi and so forth, who have their license in other states, but they're able to practice here without getting a singular Louisiana license. That may be partly responsible for that decrease. And Dr. Karen Lyon from the board did assure me there has been actually a 2.6% increase in the number of RNs over the last 4 years. I have to mention here when it comes to RNs and supply that we do have to recognize that we have an aging nursing workforce. We have 18% of our current nursing workforce is over 60 or 60 and over. And we have 20% between 50 and 59. So that is over 21,000 nurses that we're talking about who will soon, over the next several years be aging out and potentially retiring. As far as the APRNs, we have seen an increase of those holding an active license and a slight increase in the LPNs. Not sure if they're coming back and being reinstated during the pandemic, but anyway, this is the state of our supply. We recognize also that faculty, and I think it's been mentioned during this meeting, that the paucity of faculty for nursing programs is a significant issue. It is because, in part, it is not lucrative to be an educator. They can make a lot more in practice than they can teaching. So that's certainly a concern. The good news there is that there has actually been an increase in the number of budgeted RN faculty positions, and that is in part due to the increase in capitation and enrollment in our RN programs. There's also been a 71% increase in recipients of the Board of Regents faculty stipend. And we really believe this is a big driver for pulling those nurses from the bedside and putting them into these teaching roles. There has been a 44% increase as of 2020 in number of faculty who were previous stipend recipients, Board of Regents stipend recipients, who are still teaching in our schools today. So back in 18 and 19, we had 61 faculty who were previous recipients of the stipend. Now in 2020, 2021, we have 94. So that's a big difference, and it is helping. In terms of demand, I think it's important to point out that the year of the study that we've been able to look at most recently, and that is 2019. Obviously, that's pre-pandemic, and the demand has increased since that 2019 study. The other thing to note is that when the Louisiana Center for Nursing conducted the nurse employer survey, we had a 35% response rate. Obviously, we would like to have a higher response rate, so we had to impute numbers based on that 35%. And as you see here, when vacancies were imputed for non-responding facilities, the total number of vacancies increased by 149%. So we have a tremendous need for nurses. We have a growing need in the next many years. I actually was in a webinar yesterday, and the statistic was that by 2030, we were going to have, in the U.S., 1 million nurses that we would be short. We would need 1 million more. Now, obviously, some of this is related to the nursing faculty and getting those students enrolled and the whole supply chain. But the other piece, and the side that I'm on now, is concerned with keeping nurses at the bedside once they become nurses. And so there are multiple pieces of this. It's not a singular problem, but it's multifaceted. And this council, Nursing Supply and Demand Council, looks to try to look at what the trends in the data are, but we also serve as an advisory council to HealthWorks Commission. And actually this past year when I became chair, we really are trying to become more active in looking for solutions and not just where the issues are. So we have 3 work groups that are currently working, one related to diversity of the nursing workforce, another on academic practice partnerships, and another on best practices related to retention of nurses at the bedside. So that concludes my portion of the report. I'll pass it on to Dr. Bustamante.
Great, thank you so much. Good afternoon, Regents. Thank you so much for having me here. I actually do want to pick up on Dr. Doyle's presentation, and really, my job really was looking to see trying to address a problem, which is we have a broader nursing shortage and healthcare workforce shortage in the state of Louisiana, which is not something that is unique to Louisiana, but something that is common throughout the U.S. And then secondly, being able to look at what's been done and what else could be done to address these particular shortages. As Dr. Doyle mentioned, one of the findings that we had looking at the data was that we have seen greater, higher rates of turnover over the past, 5-7 years in the nursing sector. And particularly, we see aging out, which has been a considerable trend, particularly towards the end of the last decade. But more increasingly recently, we've just seen a lot of burnout. With both the high rates of turnover, that also means that there's fewer folks working, and that means that their workloads are much greater than they have been in the past. And so these two kind of forces together are really driving us in a really poor direction in terms of potentially exacerbating the shortages going down in the future. And we see the same thing in terms of with the increased demand that we've observed over the past several years in healthcare services. And particularly, when we look at the 10-year projection of both supply and demand, we're looking at about an annual shortage of over 600 nurses, registered nurses in the state. And as I mentioned, looking at this, we can certainly explore in terms of what is working right now and what are some other opportunities for us to propose other interventions. And the one thing that I would just certainly mention is, in doing this process, not only did we look at the data, which was certainly very fruitful, but also we spoke to stakeholders and asked them what's working, what's not working, and potentially, asking them what are some opportunities for us to try something else. And so, the first phase really that I take a look into is looking at graduation rates, right? And in terms of like the broader employment, and that is the broader level of folks going into employment into the nursing field. And what I do have, which I certainly reiterating what has been said already, which is that the nurse capitation has really worked. We were able to increase enrollment throughout different institutions, and there's also in the data that's presented to you, two institutions that are actually not that we don't have data for yet, just because they're new and emerging programs. And so when we're looking at all this data, it's really pointing us to two different trends. One is that we are increasing nursing enrollment, and the second one, that it's actually increasing in a very diversified way. We're not just increasing it in very specific institutions, but really across institutions, across geographical areas, and certainly also across demographic areas. We can also see that when it comes to the associate degree programs in nursing, we see these very similar trends, and a big part of it, again, is that I point to in terms of both looking at bachelor's and associate programs is because there are multiple opportunities to become registered nurses, and that is something that is really powerful in the ability of of providing different tracks, different trajectories for students to be able to become practicing nurses. What I'd also point out is that when we look at the institution, we actually do have the capacity to look at the both employment as well as earnings performance of students post-graduation. And what we actually see is that we do see some divergence in terms of what's happening in the state versus nationally in terms of wages, but also just within programs themselves, there is actually a pretty wide spectrum in terms of the earnings capacity, not just 1 year, but also 5 and 10 years out of graduation. And what this points to is really a key part of the second phase of what could be done, particularly from the Board of Regents perspective, which is looking at academic and practice partnerships or public-private partnerships, because we do see that there are some universities and some schools that really have been able to have an edge when it comes to placement, have an edge when it comes to retention of students. And one that was just really just sticks out throughout the entire data is looking at Northwestern State University and the ability that they have to work with employers across the state and get these placements. And it's really these kinds of the next phase, not only again, once you get folks into these programs, how can you make sure that, again, that they're going to have fulfilling careers after they graduate? And a big part of that is making sure that they can have placements upon completion, that they can enter the workforce in a very seamless fashion, and while also having some buy-in from employers, right, so that they can have a stake in making sure that they're able to transition students into the workforce as well. And we see, again, Northwestern State being very successful in that. There is, again, some variation in terms of the earnings trajectories of other programs as well. But again, this kind of does point to this silver lining that not only can we bring folks in, but we can certainly tweak around the edges, particularly, again, with academic practice partnerships, in order to make sure that folks come in, but also are both during year one, having high wages as much as they can, because that's really going to be a key to having retention in the field in later years. And we do see the same thing again with the cohorts associated with associate degree programs. Northwestern State, again, leads the pack once again in terms of both starting salaries and being able to have these kind of higher earnings trajectories relative to other schools. It is a critical importance and really can't overstate enough that being able to facilitate employment relatively quickly after program completion, and having that employment have either average to above average wages, but making sure that they're not in the under part of the industry in terms of wages, is that it's a key part for retention. It's a key part for making sure that folks stay in that field, because they'll have a greater and higher earnings ladder throughout thinking about, whether it's seniority or whether it's the ability to stack on other credentials or other kind of certifications, where you start off really does make a difference. And as I mentioned before, when we look at whether the comparisons between what folks in the field are earning both within the state and as well as nationally, we see that Louisiana is lagging nationally. However, that within the state itself, we do have this kind of polarized workforce where folks in the higher populated areas, the higher metro areas, are certainly having higher earnings relative to their peers in more rural areas. However, that being said, as I mentioned, as we look at these interventions that have been done over the past few years in terms of capitation in order to increasing enrollment, again, not just in these metro areas, but also just with other universities and colleges throughout the state, that is also really a big part of both existing and new health facilities, particularly hospitals, being able to deliver more services and therefore increase the workforce of nurses and other healthcare professionals throughout the state, not just in large metro areas. And so really moving forward, what I really heard in terms of folks in the field, particularly, again, both not just in the academic side, but certainly increasingly more so in the practice side, is that these academic practice partnerships are really fruitful, that they're great paths for not just to place students into jobs, but also for hospitals and for other kind of healthcare facilities, for them to actually have a sustainable workforce and being able to meet their labor demands in a sustainable way into the future. Again, knowing they're very conscientious of the fact that they're already experiencing these high levels of shortages currently, and again, they've certainly did reflect the concern that going into the next few years, that's only going to get worse. And so, in terms of how what can be done, what are some opportunities? Again, keep building onto that diversification of where these facilities are, where the programs are, which is something that we've been certainly on track. But secondly, the ability to streamline, for example, the regulatory requirements for completers to go into the field, being able to minimize that window, for example, so they can really transition into the workforce as quickly as they can. The ability for, one of the great things that Louisiana is already doing is that they're part of a consortium where where folks who become nurses in the state do have some level of reciprocity throughout the state. So to what extent can these kinds of existing programs really be leveraged, such as also, looking at the Health and Human Services funding from the federal government when it comes to underserved areas and more rural areas. These are all kinds of opportunities that are already on the table that do have funding associated with them that really just have to be leveraged to a little bit further in order for them to be as effective as they can be. And again, some of these are not necessarily within the realm of Board of Regents, but certainly within the realm of the state legislature when we're looking at, for example, reimbursement rates, whether it's through Medicaid and other kind of health reimbursement rates, as well as looking at potential ways to streamline the regulatory processes. But that's really the second phase, as I mentioned, being able to think about now that we have folks in these programs, what are the really effective ways that we can, one, transition them into the workforce as quickly as we can and make sure they can stay there for and have fruitful careers moving forward as well. Thank you.
And so with that, taking the recommendations found in both components of this report, the next steps we're stepping forward in and addressing the healthcare personnel shortage will, as Dr. Bustamante mentioned, identifying funding to really leverage those academic practice partnerships, moving beyond just nurse capitation, which is increasing those class sizes, but leveraging those public-private investments to encourage innovation and really address those regional healthcare workforce needs. In addition, expanding on, I mentioned earlier, there's currently already existing a faculty tuition stipend program where we're looking at reinstating a nurse educator stipend program that was previously administered by Regents that would award candidates that are nominated by institutions the opportunity to further their degrees, so taking them from the field into the classroom. And then we are going to be working towards executing an action plan of recommendations that's being prioritized by a commission subcommittee. As Dr. Bustamante mentioned, there are various stakeholders and multiple agencies involved in this. And so this action plan will help us identify those stakeholders involved and the steps needed to accomplish these recommendations. And so with that, senior staff recommends the board receive the 2021 Health Works Commission report and authorize Regents staff to submit this report on behalf of the board to the House and Senate Committees on Health and Welfare.
Thank you. Just a few questions. I noticed that the private institutions that produce nurses were not in the research study. Was that about data integrity, or exactly why were they excluded?
Yes, one of the key components of it is that for looking at students post-completion, it's that information is not available for private institutions, only for public institutions, because of a agreement that the Board of Regents has with both the Louisiana Workforce Commission as well as the U.S. Census in being able to track completers after they graduate.
Awesome. And so in the very beginning of your report, you indicated that you believed we needed to produce 600 more nurses in the state.
Yeah, and so really it's not even necessarily producing them. It's a shortage of a foreseeable shortage of about 618 nurses per year, looking into the next year that will be on average that will be missing. But the key components to that are, one, how can we make sure that we keep the nurses that we currently have on that are currently employed? That's a big part of addressing the shortages in and of itself, because right now what's really driving the shortages, as I mentioned, is that over the past 7 years we've been shedding just a lot of folks within the field, and we've kind of been putting a tourniquet on that by gradually increasing enrollment. But really it's kind of like a multifaceted approach, really, that you have to both increase the supply of folks entering the field while also promoting retention as much as you can. And really, I think in terms of the second phase is, some of the recommendations that certainly have just been mentioned, is looking at how you can do both of those things.
Right. And so I think to my Regents colleagues, on page 11 and 12 in our minutes, the packet, there was a long list of recommendations that are coming out of the Health Works Commission in regards to this. And so I would encourage you to read those, because I know we all have heard and lived through the nursing shortage in the pandemic. But if we believe the number is 618, which was one of the things that I've always wanted us to do, is have someone like you do the report and treat the nursing shortage like a math problem and much more like the energy sector treats engineers versus how we think about nurses. And so individuals like myself, who is a nurse, who chooses to leave the bedside, is a good thing, because we have a very comprehensive education and ability. And so I think it's about growing the profession, not just thinking about that you left the bedside and that's a bad thing. And so I just would encourage us to, as we look at our funding, to potentially continue to invest in this model to see, are we making progress in our public-private partnerships and everything that we're doing and all the strategies that Bronwyn has led of getting to the 618 annually, and then to begin to really understand with retirements and career progression and those things, does that number play out in a model that we can really 10 years from now look back and say this work led to Louisiana solving the nursing shortage. And then just one last comment, the Northwestern model is a best practice. This faculty practice partnership is important, diversity and retention as well, but the work that's been done in the healthcare industry in the Shreveport-Bossier area with Northwestern is a best practice. And certainly I know that we are looking at that model in New Orleans with the $10 million investment that LCMC recently made in partnership with LSU. And so we believe that is a model that works. So all of your continued great work to institutionalize that and to really make that a standard in practice across the state is important. So Bronwyn, thank you for being here as well. This is great work that I think will make a lasting impression in the state. Any other questions from my colleagues?
Yes, I have a question for them. A few years ago, we had Miss, I believe her name was Miss Denby. Was she the? Karen Denby. And I asked her at one of our meetings, I said, is NSU nursing school size sufficient for Shreveport's nursing needs? And she frankly said no. And I've heard your applause of it, but all I hear about it is complaints. I'm from Shreveport. Are any of y'all familiar with the Shreveport area, the nursing shortage there? Or have knowledge of it?
And so we actually did look at the underserved areas, and so we, both in terms of the, just both on the demand from the consumer side, from the patient side, as well as from the health professionals, from the hospital side and healthcare facility side, we saw the different demand disparities there. One of the key things that was really, that I just kind of want to highlight besides the Northwestern part, because Shreveport has been just like a really key part of that, is looking at like LSU Shreveport as well in their investments in the area, just because.
And they have no nursing program.
That's right, that's right.
Even though they have a med school.
Yes.
Has anybody addressed that?
Yes, and so the key two parts that that we looked at that is that in what are some ways that you can have a lot more retainment for talent to stay in that local area as well. That was really like a key part, but it wasn't necessarily something that we explored further.
Just informally and anecdotally, Region Pryor, one of the greatest challenges in the I-20 corridor of North Louisiana is, even between Monroe and going all the way to Shreveport, is the number of students who, upon graduation, pack up and move to the great state of Texas. And so when we talk about retention strategies and some of those other pieces, I think regionally, that is a specific challenge that I think as the team looks at retention strategies, that's an important challenge in that region that is somewhat unique. Any other questions? Again, thank you all for the wonderful report and the great work of Bronwyn and her team who's supporting the Health Works Commission, and I applaud the research in the Impact Econ research study. So we've heard the recommendation from the senior staff to receive the 2021 Health Works Commission report and authorize the region staff to submit this report on behalf of the board to the House and Senate Committee on Health and Welfare. Is there a motion to approve this item? Motion by Region Levy, and second by Judy Brown Williams. Any discussion, any questions? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Is there any other business to come before the Planning, Research, and Performance Committee? No. Hearing none, is there a motion to adjourn? Motion? Second? Any discussion, any questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion passes. We are adjourned. Thank you again.
Thank you so much. You all, I know I said we were going to take a break, but because we're almost there, we're going to push through. So, thank you. I'd like to call the April Board of Regents meeting to order. Obviously, members, we're continually still being streamed live, so please turn on your microphones and speak into the microphone. We'll move on to the roll being called. Ms. Doreen?
Regent David? Regent Ewing?
Here.
Regent Finley?
Here.
Regent Jackson?
Here.
Regent Levy?
Here.
Regent May?
Here.
Regent McDonald? Regent Meir?
Present.
Regent Perez? Regent Pryor?
Here.
Regent Seal?
Here.
Regent Solomon?
Here.
Regent Sterling?
Here.
Regent Temple?
Here.
Regent Weil? Regent Williams-Brown? Here. You have a quorum.
Thank you, Doreen. Next up is public comments. Do we have any public comments? Okay, hearing none. Oh, we do.
Wendy Palermo from LCTCS signed for the statewide program or the board meeting only if there were questions specific to LCTCS. So there were none proposed for her, so she just filled that out in case anyone wanted to hear from her.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. So, members, you've received a copy of the March 23rd, 2022 meeting. Do I have a motion, anyone, to approve those minutes? So move, Regent Finley, second by Regent Ewing. Okay, any discussion, any questions? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Great, so we're going to move on to the chair comments. Regents, we, as I mentioned last night at our dinner, have had the last 30 days a lot of positive things happening around our policy, around our advocacy, which is, of course, all designed to help improve the outcomes of our students. And so, this is coverage that we've had around the country from some of the most recognized names. You see those on the screen in front of you. And since adopting our co-requisite math and English policy in March last month, Regents has been featured in several, obviously, news stories. So you see those there. In each of the articles, it was noted that Louisiana's actions have been great in how innovative the policies that we have are actively helping students save time and money, which obviously at the end of the day is the thing that matters more than anything else. And ultimately get to graduation. So it's exciting to see that we're getting recognized around the country for something positive in the education field. You can give yourselves a round of applause for that. Great job. And then next, in terms of days at the Capitol, guys, please ignore that picture on the upper right-hand corner. Our partners in higher education have also gotten a lot of attention at the Capitol, and the UL system, the Southern system, the LSU system, LCTCS, and even our colleagues at the Louisiana Association of Independent Colleges and Universities have all hosted legislators and stakeholders in the Rotunda, at the Pentagon Apartments, and even the Capitol Museum, showcasing their unique mission, programs, and their talented students. And their dedicated faculty and staff. I will tell you, they've handled, the activities, virtual training. That's what I'm doing here, virtual training. I know it doesn't look like it, but it was amazing. And then the culinary demonstrations. I always speak whenever I figure out that the LCTCS event is happening. I block out a couple of hours and don't eat earlier that day because it's always absolutely amazing. It was kind of a rainy day, but the setup that they had was absolutely perfect. And I got the opportunity also to spend a little bit of time with some other Regent members. And so it was obviously a testament to the talent development occurring in each and every corner of our state every day. So Louisiana prospers well into our future. Next, our HBCU Day 2022 at the Capitol. And our HBCU Advisory Council will be hosting HBCU Day at the Capitol Tuesday, May 24th at the Pentagon Apartments upon adjournment. And we will be spotlighting the state's HBCUs, sharing with legislators and others the unique mission of them to fulfill and how they attract students from across the country seeking an HBCU experience. There will be a formal meeting for the HBCU Advisory Council, plenty of student engagement, food, and of course great entertainment from some of the finest marching bands in all the land. Y'all know that we do that extremely well. Directly speaking to that, a quick story. My little sister committed from U High to go to Hawaii, which, for those that don't really know, is a perennial top 10 volleyball school. She was going to play volleyball, and she decommitted and decided to having HBCU experience. Southern, Dillard, both were too close to her mom and dad, so she decided to go to Howard. But obviously Howard has produced some of the most successful people. So I know from in Grambling, obviously, Xavier, but she just decided to go a nice little ways away. Plus, she thought about Hawaii and how far it was away. So it wasn't just the HBC, it was also the flight for Hawaii. So, and then future educators, the next thing. Finally, the event on May 3rd, Tuesday, May 3rd. Tuesday is National Teachers Appreciation Day, and the Regents will be celebrating by honoring a group of future educators from every teacher preparation program in the state at the old state capitol, beginning with the Continental Breakfast at 8:30 a.m. Nominees from each campus will be highlighted during the ceremony, along with former and current educators serving in the legislature. The honorees' profile will also be displayed in the rotunda of the Capitol and shared on social media throughout the day so folks can see the amazing talent being developed for our classrooms, which ultimately will be developing our students and future leaders. And then, Cameron, speaking of great talent, let's talk to Regent Cameron Jackson, who will be graduating from Grambling next month, excuse me. So that means if I was jumping ahead of those finals, I'm graduating this month, next month. Are you done with the finals yet?
I'm not done with finals. I'll take finals next week.
Gotcha. You pass finals next week. So we wanted to make sure that he has his Regent stole in hand to wear with his graduation. So let's give him that now.
Well, you guys, so I guess this is the last time that we will see that nice picture on the screen. I'm excited. I'm really excited for what the future holds. I guess I'll just hop right into my report before I give, reflections. So the COVID task force, the governor sent us these nice little certificates, so that is completed. It's nice to see that we're actually moving back into where we were pre-pandemic. Students are actually getting that university feeling back, not being locked down, actually getting to the point where they're able to have those in-class sessions. And I think that's a beautiful thing, because it's especially since we're fighting against so much ambiguity right now about where is COVID, what are we doing with COVID, where are the pin marks with COVID, but we're moving back into that classroom setting. We actually had our Council of Student Body Presidents meeting. That was April 1st and April 2nd. I was actually giving a talk in Oklahoma about servant leadership, and Dr. Gabe Willis, he was actually doing a talk with the Council of Student Body Presidents down here, and he was talking on leadership also, but his leadership actually talked about leaving a legacy. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I want to touch on is leaving a legacy. Servant leadership is something that I've definitely taken a passion to, especially since serving on this board, and I want to definitely say I appreciate everyone here. Y'all have really inspired a lot in me. One of the biggest things that I always do is sit back and watch things. As you saw in DC, I love to sit back and watch, and I love to listen. I believe that listening is key. And before I speak and say anything, I have to listen. And servant leadership has become definitive within me because it allowed me to take those necessary sensitive steps in sensitive places to really fight against things that I just felt like wasn't fair, or to speak out on things. And then I feel like I wouldn't be able to get there now if I didn't have the Board of Regents to do that. So taking that step, especially as a first generation student, and really seeing what focuses in on higher education principles and values is a beautiful thing, and I will forever be grateful for everyone here. So thank you all from the bottom of my heart, and I don't think I can say thank you enough for that. So I really appreciate everyone. So as I guess take my clothes and my picture comes down, I just genuinely want to say thank you to everybody and to everyone watching. It has been a pleasure, but I must go. It's that time. So thank you.
Thank you, Cameron, and congratulations ahead of your graduation, man. It's been a great time, and that concludes my remarks. Well, next we're going to vote on the committee reports and recommendations together. So however, if any board member wants to do them separately, I didn't think so. Okay. So is there anyone who wishes to take up those? So do I have a motion to approve all the committee recommendations today in globo? So moved by Regent Seal, second by Regent May. Any discussions, any questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Next, we'll have the commissioner's report. Commissioner Reed.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Really appreciate it. Cameron, so proud of you. First, I want to make sure to express gratitude to the staff behind the scenes who worked so diligently in making our meetings and events and our work look effortless. Regents administrative professionals are second to none. Organized, imaginative, poised under pressure. They're go-to folks, and they always are problem-solving and doing great work. So this Friday is Administrative Professionals Day. So we are going to breakfast with this group, but I thought it'd be wonderful for the board to recognize the individuals who make it happen at the Board of Regents. So when I call your name, if you will join the chair for a token of appreciation and photo. Carla Smith, Kara Landry, congratulations. Thank you so much. Kim Langlois. Congratulations. Michelle Brandon. And Darcy Wagasback. Thanks for all you all do to make Louisiana students prosper, to make Regents prosper. We just couldn't do it without you. So a round of applause for each of them. That's so cute. Great photo, great. So notably absent from that hurrah, of course, is Emily Sky Kay, who is celebrating at home with her adorable new son, who was 6 pounds, 19 inches at birth. I'm sure he is much bigger than that now, but he is so sweet. She said he's snuggly, always hungry, generally happy, and a fan favorite of his big sister, Layla. So our best wishes to Emily and her precious family. Adorable pictures.
I'm just going to interrupt because the Board of Regents is obviously always on Emily's mind. She literally texted me 30 minutes after she had the baby. And I'm like, wow, for you to text somebody on the Board of Regents, then that really means that we are always on your mind, right? So that was good.
Next, we want to share with you that we had a great all higher ed cybersecurity training. We've been talking a lot about cyber today and many other issues, but this one was around public and private institutions understanding cyber hygiene and the kinds of things we can do to prevent an attack and who to call when an attack happens. So state police, National Guard, the Division of Administration, all the IT directors, presidents, chancellors, and finance officers were invited. We had about 125 individuals for the hour-and-a-half training. We're going to do some additional training with IT directors in the summer. As you know, we have to be vigilant all the time on this issue, but thanks to the partners who made this happen and certainly the institutions who participated. Last, I would say we continue to do really fun outreach. It's nice to be able to get back out and visit our campuses. And so I had an opportunity to visit Louisiana Christian University, formerly Louisiana College in Pineville. Joined them for chapel and a roundtable discussion with students and staff and faculty. And then also had a great opportunity to join the Bossier Parish Youth Advisory Council at Bossier Day at the Capitol. Great young individuals who were interested in higher ed, and lots of wonderful conversation. And then North Shore Technical Community College had a sunrise breakfast where they awarded scholarships to over 30 students. And the scholarship donors, whether they were private individuals or businesses, were at the table with their recipient. So they got to meet their student, get to know their student, and it was just really a special time. So continuing to enjoy the outreach and the opportunity to talk about the good work of this board and the importance of talent development across our state. And so very excited to report that to you as a committee and to you, Mr. Chair. That concludes my report.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. Great information, great information. Is there any other business to come before the board? And do we have any further public comments? Okay. You have the floor. Go ahead.
I want to make sure I get it right. Our own commissioner is going to be celebrated, if we can get the date right, I think it's the 3rd, is it May 3rd? May 10th, by the Business Report as one of the Baton Rouge Business Report's Women of the Year. So congratulations.
Thank you so much, Regent Sterling. Thank you so much. So, do I have a motion to adjourn? All right, moved by Regent Finley, seconded by Regent May. Any discussion? Any questions? All those in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. Ayes have it. We're adjourned. Thank you all.